Good evening, night owls, and welcome to Whisper Crowley. Tonight, I will guide you into a world of darkness, hoping to help you relax and unwind. Perhaps some of you will even drift into a haunting yet soothing sleep. Before we begin, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And now, we begin. Every story has to start somewhere, and this one begins with a doorbell ringing at a literary gathering. This isn't any ordinary gathering, however, not by a long shot. There's a lot of talk floating around about book rights and publishing deals, manuscript edits, and literary agents. Some of the guests would look very familiar to the well-read public. The rest of them are responsible for the rising fame of their best-selling authors. No, this is definitely no ordinary gathering in an ordinary home. This is a London publishing elite party. Most of the attendees are notable players in the literary industry, and the location is a Victorian-era mansion in an exclusive London neighborhood. Although some of them came from relatively humble beginnings, all of the party-goers are now quite wealthy. Most of them are notable figures in the highly competitive world of publishing and literature. Their current existence is encased in a wondrous bubble of splendor and comfort. The average person can hardly imagine what it would look like to live among them, to move in their circles and experience the marvelous pleasures they enjoy on a daily basis. They dwell in the upper tiers of society, far above the relative squalor of the masses below. And that crystalline bubble is about to burst with the ringing of the doorbell. Lights, voices, laughter. James Wilson happened to be the closest person to the door when the doorbell rang. He yelled, "I'll get it," and wandered over to take a blurry glance through the window. There was a security camera facing the front porch, but no one was monitoring the feed. If someone had been watching, they would have seen a figure lurking behind the man who was standing at the door. However, the host had sent all of his staff home for the evening, and now it was just Oliver and his guests. Most of them had a decent buzz going on, and none of them were even remotely prepared for the events that were about to transpire. This includes James Wilson, the book cover designer who opened the door. He turned around and called out, "Hey, Jeffrey's here. Hey, someone tell Oliver that Jeffrey Palmer is here." He drunkenly wobbled up the short flight of stairs to the main floor, followed closely by the new arrivals. James was too inebriated to notice the man who had followed Jeffrey Palmer inside. He also failed to see the thin trickles of blood that were leaking down the side of Jeffrey's face. There was a dazed look in Jeffrey's eyes, and for good reason. He'd just been struck on the side of the head with a pistol shortly before he rang the doorbell. The intruder locked the door behind him, and then he ushered Jeffrey up the stairs. Jeffrey ascended the staircase on wobbly legs. There was a scream caught in his throat. He could feel the barrel of the pistol pressing into his back. As soon as he got to the top of the stairs, the man with the pistol shoved him aside for a clear shot at James. The discharge was deafeningly loud. James stumbled and collapsed onto the floor, blood pumping out of a hole in his skull in a stuttering wave, rapidly pooling on the marble tiles beneath him. The intruder fired another shot into the ceiling and bellowed, "Everybody get on the floor." Now there was a moment of stunned silence. The only sounds were the ringing in their ears and the hushed murmur of classical music in the background. Then the reality of their situation penetrated through their shock. and pandemonium broke out. Some of the guests dropped to the floor where they stood, but the rest scrambled for cover. The gunman shot a woman who was trying to open a window, and then he casually put a bullet in Jeffrey Palmer, who was attempting to crawl his way down the stairs to escape through the front door. As Jeffrey rolled the rest of the way down, the intruder pulled the trigger twice more, aiming for a woman who was running up a spiral staircase to the second floor. The young woman screeched in pain, but she continued to struggle her way to the top. She collapsed at the top of the stairs and crawled out of sight. I said, "Get your asses on the floor." The rest of them promptly complied. He pulled a handful of zip ties from the side pocket of his grimy backpack and growled, "If anyone messes around, I'll blow their brains out. I don't give a damn about any of you people, you understand? Not one single damn. So don't even think about trying me." The gunmen went from person to person and tied their hands behind their back. He also emptied their pockets and confiscated their cell phones. After he was done with this particular task, the gunman locked all the windows and closed all the blinds. When he was satisfied no one would be able to see inside, the intruder pulled a battery-powered compact driver out of his pack, followed by a paper bag full of screws. He proceeded to seal the doors shut by screwing them into their frames. When he was finished, the intruder helped himself to the bar. He poured a generous amount of scotch into a crystal glass and took a deep swallow. "Even the good stuff tastes like battery acid to me." "Ah, that's rough." With his drink in one hand and his gun in the other, the intruder forced the remaining party guests to shuffle over to a corner of the room that Oliver referred to as the reading nook. It consisted of two luxurious leather couches placed directly across from each other. The couches were separated by an antique mahogany table, and the area was tastefully illuminated by ornate Victorian sconces on the walls. When all the party guests were seated on the couches, the gunman held up his glass of scotch and said, "Cheers." "Are we having fun?" No one answered. "Honestly, me neither. I haven't been having any fun for a very long time." The gunman smiled and dumped some more booze down his throat. He grimaced and tossed the glass onto the carpet beside him. "Oh, that's harsh. Belongs in some ice, am I right?" "Right?" The gunman glared at his circle of captives as he swapped the magazine in his pistol. He pointed at himself and demanded, "Does anyone know who I am? Come on, folks, take a wild guess." Everyone looked around at each other with bright, watery eyes. No one wanted to either confirm or deny anything, because either choice might result in a one-way ticket to the pearly gates. They all stayed silent and waited for whatever might come next. "Okay, we'll come back to that in a bit. Let's see if I can name all of you instead. How's that?" He looked around the room. "Okay, let me see. I think we've got Oliver Hudson sitting here beside me. You're an editor. Jeffrey was your literary critic, right? Okay, so beside Oliver is Victoria Westfield, and beside her is Daniel. Daniel Pierce, is that right? She's a novelist, and you're an editor. I saw one of you on those literary talk shows. You're a funny guy, you know that. You've got a really sharp sense of humor." Daniel tried his best not to cower beneath the intensity of his gaze. "Yeah, that's me. Thanks. And then we've got this guy sitting beside Daniel. I don't recognize him. Who are you, my man?" The party guest in question shifted uncomfortably in his seat and stammered, I'm not really a public figure. I work in investments. The gunman nodded thoughtfully and asked, "What's your name, investment guy?" The gunman gave him the side-eye. "It's Richard Thornton. I'm not a celebrity or anything. Like I said, I invest in publishing ventures. I'm not sure if that's the whole story, but okay, sure. Doesn't matter either way. You're here if you get what I mean." Richard shrank back into the couch. "Why are you here? Is this a robbery? None of us ever did anything to you." "Oh, that's not true at all. They did plenty to me. They wrecked my life." Richard blinked at him and shook his head slowly. "No, that didn't happen. You're not in reality right now. You have a sickness in your mind, okay? You're sick. Please listen to me." The gunman was already on the move. He loomed over Richard and snarled, "You know what? I actually do recognize your name. Yeah, I saw it on some financial news. Richard Thornton Investments, something like that. You're one of those greasy investors who pump money into publishing companies that churn out ghostwritten bestsellers. You buy up a shitload of unknown writers' work, and then you slap together a bunch of cookie-cutter novels that'll be forgotten before the royalty checks get sent. And you get filthy rich while you do it. You people are utter trash. Did you know that? I've never harmed you or bothered you in any way, shape, or form. This is the first time I've ever laid eyes on you, for Christ's sake. You're doing a bad thing right now, mister. You're sick. You need help." The intruder lashed out and hit Richard in the face with the barrel of the pistol. Everyone gasped at the flat, meaty thud as the barrel bounced off Richard's cheekbone. His skin split open, and blood ran freely over his jawline, dripping onto his shirt in drops and splatters. Richard gaped up at the intruder in shock. He stared back at his prisoner and murmured, "Oh, that hurts, doesn't it? Yeah, I've got 50 more lined up and ready to rock. So keep your stupid mouth shut. You think I'm sick? Me? I'm the only sane person in this whole room. You people are sick, not me." The intruder moved on to the last person on the couch and regarded him with a grimace of distaste. "Speaking of low-life pieces of garbage, here's a prime specimen, a corporate lawyer. How are you, Marcus? Oh, you don't look so good. Feeling a bit tight in the chest, are you?" He poked the ashen-faced man in the chest with the pistol and grinned. "Come on, Marcus, have yourself a heart attack. It's okay, man. Just let go and waddle your ass over to the other side. Do the world a favor and stop breathing. Leave me alone," Marcus stammered. His broad, quivering face was wet with tears. "This is crazy, You're crazy. There's that word again. Didn't we already go over this, Marcus? I'm not crazy. You know exactly who the hell I am. Come on, say my name. Say it out loud." Marcus looked up at him, his lip drawn together in a tight little line. The intruder chuckled. "You'd rather take your chances with a crazy guy than say it out loud. Holy hell. Okie dokie then. How about this?" He pulled something out of his hip pocket and flicked it open. It was a spring-loaded knife with a 5-inch blade. It looked wickedly sharp. Marcus's eyes zeroed in on the glittering business end of the knife. He cowered back as far as possible into the couch and squealed, "Don't stab me, just like a piglet." And he jabbed the tip of the blade into Marcus's meaty thigh. The lawyer screamed at the top of his lungs. setting off a chorus of horrified wailing from the other hostages. One of them heaved himself to his feet, his face distorted into a mask of terrified determination. He found himself staring into the barrel of the pistol, and he froze like a statue. "What do you think you're doing, sir? Were you about to screw around?" "What did I say about screwing around?" The would-be hero took a shuffling step back and croaked, "I wasn't doing anything. I just wanted you to stop, okay? Don't hurt anyone. Just stop it, man. Please, no, sit down and shut up." He turned his attention back to Marcus, the lawyer. "Damn, that leg is bleeding like a bastard. Did I poke an artery? I can't remember exactly, but I think there might be an artery there." Marcus looked like he was ready to faint. "I have a wife. I've got kids. Please don't kill me. For God's sake, don't do it." The intruder leveled his pistol dead center into the lawyer's forehead, his eye glinting in the muted lighting. "What's my name?" "Say my damn name, Marcus." "Say it." The young woman who was sitting beside the would-be hero stomped her feet and shrieked, "Stop it. Don't hurt him anymore. Everyone's scared to say anything, okay? He told us that he said we can't." She trailed off, her face a crumpled Kleenex smeared with dripping makeup, and she gave Oliver an uncertain look. He very slightly shook his head no in return. "He said she can't do what exactly?" the gunman asked quietly. He was still staring at Marcus, his finger on the trigger. The young woman cleared her throat and croaked, "I don't know. I don't know." The intruder turned and favored her with a mummified corpse of a smile. "Never mind what anyone else told you. They're not in charge here. I am, the guy with the gun. Go ahead and finish what you were saying." Oliver glared at her and hissed, "Emma, shut up. Stop talking. No, 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 and no. You don't make the rules here, partner." She could say whatever she wants. He gave the terrified girl a stern look and said, "Go on. It's for the best. He told us to never mention your name," she wheezed, and a fresh batch of hot, salty tears started running down her face. Oliver and Marcus, the lawyer, both groaned out loud at the same time. Oliver's face flushed a deep, ugly red. He uttered a guttural curse under his breath and gritted his teeth. "And who said that? Who told you to never mention my name?" The girl shook her head violently and started to sob. "Tell me who said that, and tell me why." She clenched her lips together in a tight line and shook her head again. The gunman gave her a long, considering look, and then he hit Marcus with the pistol. Marcus flopped back into the couch with a strangled groan. It doesn't sound like in the movies, does it? And there's no big dramatic bang when you hit someone in real life, but a good hard slap across the face. "Ah, that's different. Here, I'll show you." He shoved the knife back into his pocket and held up his hand for everyone to see. He then proceeded to whirl around and deliver a resounding slap across Marcus's jawline. The sound of the impact echoed off the walls. The lawyer immediately slumped over and let out a gurgling snore. The intruder looked around at his horrified audience and he asked, "Do you get it now? This is real, folks. No drafts, no edits, no rewrites. This blood is real. I'm real. So wipe that stupid look off your faces and wake up." He looked over at Emma and gave her a sly wink, as if they were about to share some particularly juicy bit of gossip. It was Marcus over here, wasn't it? I know it was Marcus. Just give me a yes or a no, Emma. You don't have a choice. Yes, it was Marcus. We were told to never mention your name, not even in private. He said they would come after us for breaching our non-disclosure agreement. Oliver twisted in his seat. Oh, you stupid fool. You just damned us. You know that? Stuff a sock in it. You already screwed yourselves a while ago. It just took a little time to catch up with you, that's all. Stop pointing fingers and admit you're screwed up. He turned to the young woman and gave her a puzzled look. You know, I don't recognize you either. Are you a writer or something? I'm not. Well, yes, I'm a writer, but I've been working as an editorial assistant. I'm not, I'm just an assistant. An editorial assistant got invited to a gathering like this with these people. Why? The intruder let the question hang in the air. He turned to the man who tried to sneak up behind him and asked, How about you, mister? Hero, are you the typesetter or something? What's your story? The man looked down at his lap and muttered, My name's James Wilson. I'm a book cover designer. Now I'm just going to refer to you as Mr. Hero because I'm a jerk. Anyway, last but definitely not least, we have the esteemed literary agent Andrew Fletcher. Agent, negotiator, deal maker, all that. You represent good authors, sir. Oh, you really do. You're kind of a prick, though, aren't you? I have nothing to say to that, Andrew answered carefully. He was striving to look neutral, but he was sweating in the air conditioning. He hesitated and then added, What do you want from us? I want my life back. But that's not going to happen, is it? So now we're going to do this instead. He looked around with a frown of concentration. Okay, so I've got, let's see, 8 of you sitting here. There's one upstairs, and there's me. That makes 10 of us in total. If I could write a story about what's happening here tonight, I'd call it 10 Little Scumbags. Did you get it? You know, like that Agatha Christie novel with the really off-color title. What? Nobody gets it. Huh? Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Who the hell is reading Agatha Christie these days? Am I right? Andrew swallowed a lump in his throat and repeated, What do you want from us? Why are you here? The intruder stood there and looked down at him with a smooth, blank expression. Not talking, hardly even blinking. He just stood there and stared at him. And then he took in a long, measured breath and leaned in close. The publisher ended up changing the name of the book to And Then There Were None. And I guess that's your answer, Mr. Fletcher, this is insane. Come on, don't pretend this isn't completely insane. You need to stop this right now before. The literary agent's words faltered in his mouth. The look in the intruder's eyes was murky and strange. There wasn't any light glimmering behind that flat, hopeless gaze. There was only darkness. Oh, hell no. It's too late to stop. It's way too late to stop. Andrew shook his head and breathed, That's not true. Listen to me, okay? You don't have to do this. We'll get you some help. The intruder abruptly hauled off and punched Andrew in the stomach, making him double over. He gave the wheezing literary agent a feral smile. I don't got to listen to you, champ. I don't got to listen to nobody, and that's the truth. So screw you and screw me, and screw the rest of them too. There's no stopping me, my man. We're heading towards the end of the line. Andrew took in a tortured breath and forced himself to sit up straight. The intruder stopped smiling. For a few seconds, he looked like a frightened child, alone and lost in the wilderness. He took in a deep, shuddering breath and said, "There's no point, Andrew. The time for arguments is long gone. I'm doing this because you killed me, you son of a bitch. You people destroyed my life, and now I'm going to return the favor." The intruder abruptly walked away from his hostages and headed for the spiral staircase. As soon as he was gone, Oliver hissed, "Emma, run to my study and call 999. Quick, before he comes back." "Go." Emma blinked back tears and sniffed. "How? My hands are tied behind my back." "Grab a pencil with your teeth and press the buttons, dummy." "Go on, hurry up." Victoria Westfield glared at him and spoke up for the first time since the beginning of their horrifying ordeal. "Why don't you do it, Oliver? I mean, it's your house, isn't it? As far as I'm concerned, it's your fault this nutcase got inside. Where's your security team?" Oliver made a rude noise with his lips. "What, my security team? I'm not Penguin Random House over here, Victoria. I don't have a security team. I can't afford that, come on." "Yeah, I think that's bull, but whatever. We can talk about that later. Go call the police." The publisher gave her a look of disbelief. "Hell no. She's the idiot who couldn't keep her mouth shut, not me." He turned back to Emma. "Emma, why are you still sitting there? Get going, for Christ's sake. What are you waiting for?" Marcus opened his eyes and let out a soft groan. The side of his face was swelling up rapidly, making him look like some kind of grotesque half-man, half-chipmunk hybrid. "My jaw hurts." "It hurts to talk, then stop talking." Oliver turned back to Emma. He jerked his head in the direction of the study and hissed, "I'm not asking over here, sweetie. I'm telling. Get up and get moving." Everyone jumped in their seats as they heard a gunshot from upstairs. It was followed by a second shot, and then a third. And then there was silence again. Who was it? Was it Natalie? I think she ran upstairs when he started shooting. I think he just killed her. Who cares? He's up there and not down here, so get off your ass and make the call. Victoria bumped him aggressively with her shoulder. Eat a bag of crap, Oliver. You're an ass. Did you know that? The publisher glared at her. You don't get ahead in this business by being nice, Victoria. You of all people should know that. Victoria's eyes smoldered with a deep, long-standing animosity. Let me tell you something, Oliver. If I get out of this alive, I'm going to spill the beans on you. And I'm not talking about what's happening right now. I mean all of it. The whole shebang. Oliver's entire head flushed an ugly shade of crimson. He looked away from her and muttered, You better watch your mouth, Victoria. Who the hell do you think you are? Hey, if you're so full of piss and vinegar, maybe you should make the call. Go ahead. Richard thumped his foot on the floor to get everyone's attention. He jerked his head at the stairs and whispered, He's coming back. Be quiet. They all watched with bated breath as the gunman ambled down the spiral staircase, his pistol dangling at his side. He was cradling something in his other arm. It was a gold-plated bust of a quill-wielding figure, looking at peace and smiling at nothing in particular. He stopped in their midst and announced, and then there were 9. He saw the disgusted expression on their faces and added, Just some gallows humor, folks. Got to lighten the mood every now and then, right? Emma made a soft, choking noise in her throat. Why did you kill Natalie? She was one of the nicest people I've ever known, because she was here. He looked around at the ornate furnishings. I got to say, you have a lot of really cool stuff lying around, Oliver. How much is this thing worth? Maybe 4,000 pounds or so. I don't know for sure. The market value and stuff like that goes up and down. I'm holding a 4,000-pound knick-knack, You just have it sitting on a shelf beside your bed, getting all dusty and such. Is this a literary muse or something? You don't really strike me as a spiritual guy. I'm not religious. She's the muse of literature, so it seemed appropriate. The gunman plunked the sculpture down on the coffee table and scornfully shook his head. So you think you're creative, do you? That's damn funny, my man. You've never created a goddamn thing, and that's the truth. Your company is just a glorified bank. You finance other people's work in exchange for a big slice of the profits. I fail to see how that makes you an artist, unless you were talking about being a rip-off artist, because that's exactly what you did. You ripped me off. You used my intellectual property and made tens of thousands of pounds. And what did I get? Nothing. Not a single pence. He poked himself in the chest and said, I'm the one who creates, not you. I should have this overpriced paperweight sitting on my table, not you. That's not how it works, though, is it? No, people like me, we don't even have a bed, let alone a goddamn nightstand. Nope, no gold statue for me. That's not how it worked out. You know what really happened? Oliver wisely kept silent. The intruder gave him a considering look and said, I'll tell you what really happened. I wake up one morning and see a message from someone who's a fan of my work. I mean, I don't really have a ton of fans or anything, but they do exist anyway. They sent me a link to a book announcement on a publishing website. I read the announcement and said, what the hell is this? Because the plot seemed to be an awful lot like one of my short stories. Do you want to guess what happened next? His hostages remained silent. The intruder smiled at all of them in turn, one by one, his nicotine-stained grin crackling with dreadful fury. At first, I was in denial, as I'm sure you can imagine. I couldn't believe my own eyes. I mean, surely, this wasn't happening right. How would a London publishing house ever become aware of my work in the first place? I wasn't famous. I wasn't even well known. I was just another self-published idiot who occasionally posts some work online. It didn't make any sense. I couldn't wrap my head around it. He paused for a moment to stare at Oliver, who avoided his eye and shifted nervously in his seat. The intruder shook his head at him and continued. You know, when this storm hit the fan, I was working as a janitor in a factory. I was making minimum wage, mopping floors and scrubbing toilets. To be very frank, it was a bad place to work. And a lot of the folks who worked there, they were bad too. Bad, bitter, shitty people. Every now and then, someone would finger paint the toilet stall with their own feces. I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. Sometimes the fecal graffiti would say something offensive about me, the janitor. Can you imagine that? No, I don't think you can. You don't have any imagination. You're as dull as a butter knife, Oliver. Dull and greedy and damn useless. Anyway, I was pretty broke. Minimum wage is virtually nothing. That money would have changed my life completely. Not only that, but think of the doors it would open. if I had a writing credit for a best-selling novel. That's a hell of a thing to have on your resume. Most writers would kill for something like that. It basically never happens. I mean, even if I had a really good literary agent, it would still be a 1 in a million chance. The intruder fell silent. He stared at the wall for a while, then abruptly whirled around and headed for the bar. He poured himself another glass of scotch and called out, "Here's the thing, folks. I didn't have an agent. I didn't have a publisher, an editor, none of that. I was just floating around by myself on the fringes, a really small fish in a giant ocean. I was minding my own business like a good little fishy, scrubbing my toilets and selling maybe 15 books a month online. Don't get me wrong, it absolutely sucked, but at least it was something. You get me? It wasn't a good life. Hell, it was hardly even adequate, to be honest, but it was something. It's better than nothing at all." The intruder marched back to the reading nook with his drink in hand, his eyes watering from the booze he poured down his throat at the bar. He raised his glass and said, "A toast to our dreams. Beautiful, fragile dreams. They only become reality for the rich and powerful, because those bags have the cash to make it happen, and they also have a team of lawyers. Isn't that right, Marcus?" Marcus made a small sound in his throat, and he began to tremble all over. Everyone could feel a thundercloud of explosive tension building in the air. The other hostages looked at Marcus with wide eyes and racing hearts. He was going to be next. The intruder stopped in front of him and drawled, "Marcus, you're not Marcus when you sign a threatening email, are you?" "No, sir. You go by Attorney Blackwood when you're out for blood. I didn't do anything wrong. I was doing my job. It was nothing personal, nothing personal. Oh, don't you remember sending me that email on Christmas Eve? You were pretty hot under the collar when you sent that baby along, weren't you? Christ almighty, that thing was freaking 10 pages long. You wrote an essay about how much I'd regret my actions if I didn't disappear. Man, you were mad as hell, weren't you? Why is that, Marcus? Is it because you knew I was right? I didn't. I mean, yes, I did send that email, but you threatened us first. I sent a very clear and professional response to your baseless claims. Maybe my tone was a bit too, firm, I suppose, sure. But frankly, you're lucky I didn't launch a lawsuit of my own. You have no right to." The intruder kicked the couch between Marcus's legs and screamed, "You better shut the hell up, douchebag. What did you just say to me? Baseless? Where the hell have you been for the past 20 minutes? The cat's already out of the bag. We all know that it happened, for crying out loud. Daniel over here didn't even bother to change the name of the protagonist. What are you, a freaking robot? Look at you. Your thighs bleeding all over the place, and your hands are tied behind your back. This is where you're at right now, and you're still coughing up some pre-recorded lawyer talk. Incredible." Oliver was looking at Marcus with narrowed eyes. "What's he talking about? You didn't say anything about an email, and you responded to him without consulting me first." A slow smile spread across the intruder's face. "I think someone was overstepping their bounds. Tell them what happened, Marcus. Tell him everything, or I'll break your teeth." Marcus crumpled back into the couch, looking diminished and immensely miserable. "We got an email from this guy about a year after we first heard from his solicitor. He said if he didn't get confirmation that Andrew was aware of the incident, he'd go after us on social media with his accusations. Oliver's face was becoming redder by the second. Through gritted teeth, he snarled, "Do you know what kind of storm this could have brought down on my head? Why didn't you call me? This goes for you too, Andrew. You never said a single word to me about this." "He told me I'm a nobody," the intruder interjected. His angry smile abruptly collapsed, leaving a vacant and haunted look in its wake. "He said I'm delusional. He wrote 10 pages of crap to explain why I was wrong, and then he threatened to screw up whatever was left of my existence if I didn't go away." I sat there at my kitchen table on Christmas Eve and read this pompous horseshit while my wife tried to pretend everything was normal. Sort of buzzing around the house and moving the ornaments around, messing with the tree, just pretending to be busy. Just trying to ignore me as I sat there getting angrier and angrier, just trying her goddamn best to make Christmas happen. And then I jumped up and I threw my phone across the room, and I yelled, "You're full of crap, and you know it." The gunman paused and looked around the room with a bewildered expression, as if he wasn't sure where he was anymore. He let out a shaky breath. "My wife," she turns to me with tears in her eyes, and she yells back, "Why can't you just let it go? I can't take this anymore. Just let it go and move on." The gunman took another deep drink and gasped at the burning in his throat. He motioned at Marcus with the pistol and said, "You were scared people would find out. The audience, the people who line up to buy Oliver's crappy books. Can you imagine the response if I went public? People love to hate the players in publishing. No matter how much they adore you, they're always secretly waiting for an excuse to shove you off your pedestal. The rest of you dumb idiots might not understand this, but Marcus understands it just fine. He knows the power of public opinion." He pointed the gun at Marcus. "What's your job, Marcus? What does Oliver's company employ you to do?" Marcus gave the intruder an uncertain look. "I'm the head of their legal team." "Yeah, sure, but what is your specific function?" "What do you do?" Marcus blinked at him and said nothing. It was obvious he was having difficulty moving his jaw. The left side of his face looked like a Halloween mask. It was tacky with drying blood, and his cheek was swollen to balloon-like proportions. The stab wound in his inner thigh was no longer bleeding, but it throbbed with a fiery heat that made him want to pass out. He took a deep, shuddering breath and said, I don't know what you want me to say. The truth. Your job is to protect the company from losing money. That's what you do. Being called out for stealing from a working man. Oh, that wouldn't look very good. Something like that has the potential to hurt book sales and drain their bottom line. It could be a problem, yes. But I investigated your claims and they were look, they were untrue. I answered all of them in great detail. The intruder's eyes were wide as saucers. His breath was puffing in and out of his chest, in grunts and snorts. You stupid jerk. Drop the innocent act, for Christ's sake. You thought I was going to crawl into the sewer and never return, didn't you? But then I came back, and she got mad because I wasn't supposed to do that. Oliver interjected, I want to see this response you got from Marcus. You have access to email on your phone. The intruder winced at the sound of his voice. He bent down to look Oliver directly in the eye, and he said, I don't have to show you anything, my man. The time for verifying and examining the evidence Oh, that time is long gone. Just be quiet and let me say what I have to say." He pointed at the literary agent and angrily shook his head. I didn't think Andrew even knew, but apparently he did, and he just didn't care. "You're a special kind of jerk, did you know that? You talk all that stuff online about how you're a regular salt of the earth kind of guy, and it's a bunch of lies. You're another pampered fool in the back of a limousine. You represent books about the struggles of regular people, but I doubt you even know any regular people. You're 10 times worse than Oliver over there, because he doesn't try to hide his true identity. He's a vulture and he knows it. You, however, you live entirely up your own ass. We have absolutely nothing in common, you and I. You live up in the clouds. Hell, you wouldn't even notice one of us regular people, not unless we took you hostage and forced you to notice." Oliver appeared to not even be aware of the exchange between the intruder and Andrew. He was too busy glaring at the head of his legal department. He suddenly yelled, "God damn it, Marcus. Why didn't you come to me when you got the email? I would have cut him a deal, for Christ's sake. What would it cost? 20 grand maybe. 40? Who gives a damn? Now look at us, you goddamn idiot. You stupid son of a..." The shot was deafening in the narrow corner of the room. A chunk of Oliver's head sprayed on the wall behind him, followed immediately by a crimson gush of blood. He choked out a gurgling groan and fell sideways. His head landed in Victoria's lap. She screamed and jumped up from the couch, only to be immediately shoved back down by the intruder. She fell on top of Oliver and squirmed away, crowding up against Daniel with an expression of hysterical disgust. "Nobody gets up from the couch. Don't even think about it. Screw you." He was bleeding on me. His blood is all over my legs. I don't care if you're drowning in it, lady. You keep your ass on that cushion. This isn't fair. I didn't do anything to you. I starred in a book launch and got a paycheck. That's it. That's all I did." The intruder took another big gulp of scotch and wandered away into the middle of the room. He looked around at the opulence of his surroundings with a mixture of contempt and wonder. "Stop whining about it. I don't care about you. Get him off the couch. Get him away from me." The gunman stormed back to the reading nook and pulled the body off the couch. He tucked his firearm in his waistband and dragged Oliver to the other side of the room. "And then there were 8. Tell me something, Andrew. Why are you people gathered here tonight? Seems like a coincidence that everyone here worked on the same book. It's a bit late for a release party, so what's the occasion?" A fleeting look passed between the remaining hostages. Andrew licked his lips and answered with a question of his own. "How did you find this place? Oliver's address isn't public knowledge." "Oh, I've been doing my research. I guess it's time for the second act of my story. That's what I do, isn't it? I tell stories. I tell them and you steal them. Isn't that right, mister?" "Fletcher, no, that isn't right at all. Go ahead and tell your story, sir. Here goes nothing. We'll call this Act 2, the aftermath. Anyway, after Marcus sent me that charming email on Christmas Eve, I gave up on trying to contact anyone. I was worried I'd have to defend myself against you shady bastards in a legal suit, and I was terrified I'd lose. I didn't have a lawyer anymore, so I was pretty much screwed. I guess I kind of plunged into a downward spiral. I started drinking again. I couldn't sleep without it. I didn't care about anything. All I could think about was the theft of my work. Writing takes a lot of time and concentration. You don't just churn out a novel in a month and call it good. Research, edit, rewrites, more edits, it never ends. On top of all of that, you still got to work and make ends meet. I kept going through the motions for a while, but it wasn't good anymore. I couldn't lose myself in the story. The magic was gone, and that really messed me up. Losing the ability to slip away into my own imagination. That was even worse than getting ripped off. It was almost like losing my hand or something. I wasn't whole anymore. I got frustrated, and then I got angry. I started being a jerk to everyone around me, at all times. No chill, as the kids say. No chill at all. I hated everything, but I hated myself the most. I was almost at my breaking point, and then I quit my job. What happened? Why, the intruder removed his filthy baseball cap and ran a hand through his balding hair. Well, I used to be a nobody with a dream, and then I was just a nobody. I couldn't pretend to care anymore. I gave them 2 weeks' notice, and that was that. I told the wife I would look for another job, but I didn't. She tried her best to be understanding, but how long is that supposed to go on? When she started to get on my case about it, I told her, I'll devote all my time to writing, and I'll make it work. I promise. But promises from me apparently don't mean jack, because that didn't happen either. I just sort of wandered around and brooded all day. He ran his hand over his thinning hair again and favored his captive audience with a crooked smile. Look, I've got a record, okay. Drugs, petty theft, some stuff like that. Poor people's crimes. I paid my dues, but that doesn't change anything. People always think that having a criminal record doesn't matter when you're looking for a job. But of course it does. Why take a risk on a guy like that if you could just hire someone with a clean background? Let's face it, most people have never been arrested, let alone convicted of a crime. If you've got that kind of baggage, it limits your opportunities. That's not fair. I'm sorry it's like that. Me too. In my experience, the best you can hope for is temp work at a factory or a warehouse, and that isn't saying much. I remember working at this one place, a warehouse. It had a conveyor belt that was so long you couldn't even see where it started. The conveyor was jammed full of boxes at all times, every minute of the day. There was an endless line of boxes, stretching as far as the eye could see. I would stack 8 of these heavy bastards on a wooden pallet, and then a guy on a forklift would take them away. I had no idea what was inside the boxes, and neither did any of my coworkers. The intruder looked at Andrew and asked, "Do you know what struck me most about that place?" No one ever said my name. Not once. They just point and say, "Hey, you." I was out on the floor day after day, doing all the heavy lifting in the summer heat, but no one ever came up to me and said, "Thanks for getting our shipments ready on time." No, all the praise went to the area manager, a guy who never left his air-conditioned office. He literally never stepped onto the floor the entire time I worked there. Do you see the parallel here, folks? The intruder was starting to shake like a leaf in his filthy sweatshirt. You people somehow managed to find the one thing that was sacred to me. My stupid little ambition, my wonderful little daydream. You found it and you took it from me. I did all the heavy lifting so you could take it and make thousands of pounds off my work. And what did you say when I dared to speak out? You told me I'm a nobody, an entity no one, nothing at all. Well, look over here, you shady little coward. Here I am in the flesh. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Stop getting yourself worked up and listen to reason. Who cares if I'm getting worked up, huh? After all, I'm nobody, right? Right? The muzzle of the pistol flashed and let out a deafening bang, and everyone screamed. Marcus, of course, screamed the loudest of all of them. He fell off the couch and landed on his back, still screaming. Marcus began to pull himself along the floor with his good leg, gibbering nonsense words of terror as he slowly wormed his way across the carpet. The intruder stood passively and watched the lawyer's futile attempt to run for his life. His lower lip started to quiver as if he were about to burst into tears, but his eyes were dry and hot with the fires of vengeance. They had already scorched his soul, and now the flames would also consume his enemies. Tonight they would all burn together. The intruder grabbed Oliver's gold statue and followed after his hated nemesis. He stopped the lawyer's agonized escape with a kick to the ribs. The intruder pinned the weeping man with his knee and grunted, "I'm real, you son of a bitch." The statue bounced off the lawyer's forehead. Once, twice, and then a third time for good measure. The intruder rose to his feet and brandished the blood-splattered statue at the rest of the hostages. He screamed, "Do you see that? Huh? Do you see that?" Marcus was already finished, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The intruder growled like a rabid dog and battered the dying man with a primal savagery. Droplets of blood and bits of flesh splattered across the ceiling, the walls, everywhere. The intruder didn't stop until the lawyer's entire head was completely destroyed. When the intruder was finally satisfied, he dropped the statue and rolled away from his victim. He lay on his back for a few moments, panting from exertion and covered in blood. He sat up and gasped, There's not much time left. That lady upstairs was on the phone with 999 when I shot her. The cops probably have this place surrounded by now." James gave him a furious look and snapped, "You sick, twisted piece of garbage. Do you imagine that was somehow justified? I hope you rot in jail forever." The intruder climbed to his feet. "Huh? We haven't heard from you in a while, Mr. Hero. You're going to deliver your big hero speech now. Go on, say your piece. Make it quick." James grimaced right back at him and said, "You've already killed the people who were directly responsible. What do you want now? Some more attention? Is that it? You want us to say your name? You don't deserve one. You're just a big man with a gun. Keep hiding behind your gun, you pathetic bastard." The intruder gave him an incredulous look. "The gun is just a lump of metal. It can't do anything unless I squeeze the trigger. Do you want to see something really dangerous?" He stomped over to Oliver's wall-sized bookshelf and grabbed something off the end table. It was a TV remote. The intruder seized a handful of James's hair and waved the remote in his face. "Now this thing right here, this thing is incredibly dangerous, Mr. Hero. This thing is the bomb. I couldn't possibly do more damage, not in 1,000 lifetimes." James opened his mouth to reply, but he couldn't think of anything to say. At that instant, a man's voice began blaring from a bullhorn outside. The voice bellowed, "Attention! This is Inspector Williams of the Metropolitan Police. In approximately 1 minute, you will receive a phone call on the landline that's registered to the homeowner. Please answer this phone call. Why? The cops are here, the intruder murmured. His face was pale and drawn. That look of being lost and afraid passed over his features again, like a dark shadow. Victoria exclaimed, "Just give yourself up, for God's sake. It's pointless. You don't have to die tonight, and neither do the rest of us. You need help." The intruder gave her a sharp look. "I know why you all came here tonight. You came here to talk about a sequel." No one answered him, but the guilty expressions on their faces was enough. The intruder nodded to himself, a sorrowful gesture, and he shook his head. Jeffrey Palmer spilled the beans. "You know how I got to him. I catfished the dumb old bastard with some stock photos. I actually Googled blonde attractive stock photo and used them in my profile. Yeah, it was that easy. I tied him up and kept him locked in the trunk of his car for a while. When I finally let him out, he was more than willing to cooperate." The gunman dug into his backpack and he pulled out a manuscript for the proposed sequel. He waved it in the air and said, "Original draft by Daniel Pierce." "Ah, you did all this by yourself, did you? Or maybe you were just taking all the credit for someone else's work again. That would be par for the course, wouldn't it?" A telephone started to ring inside Oliver's study. The intruder said, "Excuse me for a second," and jogged over to answer it. The hostages strained to hear his side of the conversation. It was very brief. "Hello? Yeah, that's me. Okay, be quiet for a second. I don't have a list of demands. It's not like that. No, I'm not going to tell you why. I'm sure you'll figure it out later. It's just something I need to do. That's all. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?" "No, absolutely not. You're not understanding me, officer. I don't want any of that. I'm going to do what I need to do. And when it's over, you can go ahead and blow me to pieces. I honestly don't give a damn." He listened for a while and then made an impatient sound. The intruder came back to the reading nook with an irritated expression on his face. He glared at his hostages with bloodshot eyes and choked. "The cops want to negotiate. They don't get it. I don't want money or recognition. I don't have a noble cause or manifesto. I just want to kill you. Let us go. Killing us won't make it right. It'll just make you wrong." The intruder zeroed in on her with a shell-shocked stare. "Why are you even here, lady? You never gave me an answer." Emma flushed a deep red. She muttered something inaudible and stared at the floor. The intruder nudged her leg with his foot. "I didn't hear you." "Speak up," Victoria interjected. She was screwing Oliver. "That's why she's here. He liked them young and vulnerable. That was his thing." The intruder wrinkled his nose at Oliver's corpse. "You were sleeping with this guy. Oh, that had to be rough. Don't get me wrong, though, I get it. You do what you got to do in this world. I wasn't screwing him, but thanks. We were actually seeing each other for almost 6 months. We were in a relationship." Victoria raised an eyebrow and asked, "Do you really think so, hun?" "Look, I knew Oliver for many, many years. Believe me, he was going to get bored and toss you out like a bag of trash. It happened to me too. It happened to a lot of us. And he didn't take no for an answer. If you said no, he'd just do what he wanted anyway. Once again, it happened to a lot of us. And look where you are now. I'm sorry if that happened to you, but look, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I do know one thing. I'm not an editorial assistant. I'm a writer, Victoria. I belong in the bestseller lists, just like you. Everyone needs a break at some point. You got yours, didn't you? I was just trying to get mine. Victoria gave her a pitying look. I'm sure you're a damn fine writer, but here's the problem, Emma. There's a lot of damn fine writers out there. And if you do manage to succeed, you won't belong to yourself anymore. They'll use you up, and then they'll tear you down, and when there's nothing left, they'll throw you away. The intruder sat down on the couch beside Richard, unmindful of the blood on the cushion. There's a parasite waiting on every rung of the ladder, all the way up and all the way down. Speaking of which, I want to ask Richard here the same question. Why are you here, fella? You're not a publishing guy. You're a finance tycoon, correct? Or maybe that's not the full story. Caught in the spotlight, Richard's face rapidly drained of blood. He looked down and mumbled, I've known Oliver since university. I'm an investor in his publishing house, lending him money and hoping for a good return. That's the full extent of my involvement here. It was just business. That's a really swell thing to do, Richard. Helping your friends realize their dreams. That's very noble. I used to have dreams too. It was nice to have those dreams. Oh, it really was. And it would have been super helpful if I was paid for the use of those dreams. Oh, you bet. But that's not how it played out, my man. So now we're here. A light went on behind Richard's eyes. I'll give you £1,000,000 if you let me walk out that door. Hell, I'll give you 2,000,000. Just let me walk out of here, and it's yours. The intruder looked darkly amused by the real estate mogul's offer. He cracked a grim smile and chuckled. What about these other people? I bet you're probably the wealthiest person here, living or dead. Are you going to offer to pay for them too? I don't care about these people. I hardly even know them, for Christ's sake. If they did something to you, go ahead and deal with them. I don't give a damn. Just let me live. A shadow passed behind the intruder's icy gaze. He studied Richard's battered, miserable face and said, Of course you don't care about them. They aren't fat stacks of money. They're other people. Here, come with me. The gunman grabbed Richard by the shirt and hauled him to his feet. He ushered him down the steps to the front door. Take a peek out this window and tell me what you see. The intruder steered him in front of the door and pulled up the blinds. Richard gave him an uncertain look, and the intruder said, Go on. Tell me what's happening out there. Here, just a second. Put this on first. He jammed his baseball cap onto Richard's head and pushed him in front of the window. A few seconds later, a sharpshooter put a round through his forehead. A splatter of red burst from the back of his skull as he fell in a shower of glass. He was dead before he hit the ground. The intruder quickly reached over and dropped the blinds again. A split second later, another shot blasted through the slats and embedded itself in the staircase. He ejected the magazine from his own pistol as he hurried up the stairs, fishing another one from his pocket. As he studied the dwindling ranks of his hostages, he vaguely motioned at the door with a bitter grin and announced, And now there are 7. Andrew twisted in his seat and glared at the intruder with a look of disgust. Do you think that was funny, huh? Is this funny to you? Nothing is funny. And he shot Andrew twice in the chest. Emma screamed as the literary agent tumbled onto the floor. The intruder grabbed him by the leg and dragged him into the open space of the living room. He bared his teeth in a furious smile and repeated, "Nothing is funny. Not even close. In fact, everything is awful." He proceeded to punctuate his words with a series of kicks to the head and body, ranting and raving as spit went flying in all directions. "You screwed up, Andrew. You screwed up. You screwed up so bad. You destroyed me. You destroyed my marriage. You destroyed my entire life. You pissed down my neck, and you told me it was raining, didn't you? You destroyed my life." The intruder stopped to catch his breath, panting and wheezing, and that bitter grin was still pasted on his face. At that point, Oliver's business line began to ring again. The intruder answered it on the third ring. "It's still me. I'm still alive. You made a mistake. Oh, hell yeah, you definitely made a mistake. You just killed the finance guy. Good work, dumbass." He paused, then quietly said, "If you come in, I'll blast the whole mansion sky high. I've got the doors rigged to blow, and I'm wearing a vest with, what was that? No, it's not. For Christ's sake, listen to me, man. Is that something you could ever give me? It isn't yours to give. Look, I don't think we have anything to talk about, okay? No more phone calls. Stay the hell out until it's over." The gunman hung up on the negotiator, and then he shot the phone off the desk. It jumped into the air with a loud pop and spray of plastic. He closed his eyes and took in a deep breath, squeezing the pistol between his hands in a sweaty death grip. As he filled his lungs to capacity, he let it out slowly, bit by bit, and the trembling in his hands almost ceased. Not completely, but almost. What the hell is going on? And a sudden curtain of tears blurred his vision. He wanted to fade away and disappear, but that wasn't possible. He was doomed to finish what he'd started. There simply wasn't any other course of action. The intruder wiped his eyes with his sleeve and hurried back to the reading nook. "Looks like we're in the final act, everyone. No more foot dragging." The hostages looked around at each other with panic in their eyes. "What does that mean? What are you saying?" In response, he racked the slide and loaded a round into the chamber. Emma let out a whimper and started to hyperventilate. Daniel glared at him and snapped, "Do you understand how many lives you've completely shattered tonight?" "Over what? 60 grand, maybe. How long do you think that money would have lasted? The royalties aren't going to make you rich. Believe me, it isn't good money. And a book credit isn't some sort of golden ticket to fame and fortune either. You threw your life away, and for what? Why do you really think you were robbed of your success? Because here's the harsh reality, okay? I can almost guarantee you wouldn't have gone anywhere. One and done, never to be repeated. How do you think you would have handled that, tough guy? Would you have taken your little gun and killed the entire industry? You're an idiot." The intruder gave him a bewildered look. "Oh, go to hell, you jackass. You stole from me. You people made tens of thousands of pounds from my story, and you didn't give me anything. Not one red pence. No recognition, not even a pat on the back. How the hell are you trying to make yourself look like you're the good guy right now? Do you think you're the only one who's ever been ripped off? Because it's happened to me too, several times. and it sucked really bad each and every time. So I get it, man. I do. It sucks, and it makes you want to light the whole world on fire. But it's just another harsh reality for this business. Yeah, okay, you wrote a damn good story. So what? They're not going to invite you into the publishing house and give you a job. Are you kidding me? You're an outsider, get it? You're just another average Joe with a pinch of talent. You're not one of them, and you never will be. Do you think they want someone like you hanging around the editorial room? You don't belong there. They probably wouldn't even let you sweep the parking lot. You don't. The look on the gunman's face made Daniel stop talking. He loomed over the editor and repeated in a strangled whisper, I'm an outsider, an interloper, an intruder, if you will. Okay, I won't argue that. You're right. I'm not one of you soulless heels. No, before this happened, I was a decent person. And I don't give a damn about money or recognition, not anymore. I don't care about starting a career either. I don't even care about dying. Just between you and me, I'm pretty sure there's no heaven or hell. There's only hope on one side and death on the other. The editor opened his mouth to say something, and the intruder promptly popped him on the chin with a left hook. Daniel's head snapped back, and he looked up at his tormentor with a dazed expression. Keep your mouth closed and listen. I'm talking here, not you. I'm talking about hope. Let me tell you about the nature of hope, okay? It's like a tiny little candle out there in the void. It's so small, you know. It's so small, and it's so goddamn fragile. And beyond the light of the flame, there's darkness and sorrow and just nothing. Nothing at all. And then you morally bankrupt bastards, you came along and you pissed out the flame. You didn't have to do that, but you did. And now there's only the void. Daniel mutely shook his head. His eyes were glimmering with tears. I'm sorry, okay. It wasn't my fault. The intruder prodded him in the chest with the pistol. He leaned down and breathed. The light is gone, and now it's time to go to sleep. Victoria twisted in her seat and screeched, It's not our fault you just gave up and quit. It's not our fault you're a loser. Yeah, that's right, you're a loser. Do you want to hear another truth, you whiny little jerk? You don't have what it takes to make it in this business. You'd get eaten alive, you're right. I wasn't made to swim with the sharks. I was just a dreamer with my silly little dreams. And then you destroyed them. Your dreams can get damned too, she spat at his face. The intruder wiped his face with the sleeve of his hooded sweatshirt. And then he was suddenly looming over her, his hand drawn back to knock her senseless. She hissed, Don't you touch me, and lashed out with both feet, driving both her heels into his shins. He let out a shrill cry and stumbled back. Victoria screeched in triumph, and bicycle kicked her legs at him with desperate intensity. By sheer accident, one of her feet knocked the gun out of his hand. It spun away into the air and disappeared beneath the opposite couch. Get him, Victoria screamed, and launched herself at the gunman like a battering ram. Her head slammed into his stomach, and they both fell into the coffee table, smashing the glass top into 1,000 glittering shards. He threw her aside and tried to stand up, but he was booted back to the floor by James, who immediately lost his balance and tripped over the table. He rolled across the broken glass and flopped onto the top of the intruder, pinning him down with his body weight. "Jump on him! Hold him down!" James shouted. Daniel leaned forward in his seat and twisted his arms against the rigid grasp of the zip tie, fighting against it with all his strength. There was a horrible flare of pain as his skin tore open beneath the plastic teeth, and then the zip tie snapped in half. "My hands are free." And he jumped on the intruder's back, pummeling him with his arms that were completely numb from lack of circulation. Emma and Victoria both dropped their weight across the intruder's flailing legs. He roared in fury and squirmed like a snake beneath them. Victoria yelled, "Daniel, get the gun." The intruder managed to heave himself onto the table, and James squealed, "He got me." He squirmed away from the brawl with blood pouring from a deep cut across his abdomen. The intruder twisted around with wiry strength and slashed Daniel across the neck. The editor clapped a hand across the wound and jumped to his feet. He was slashed across the leg as he tried to run for the front door, causing him to fall over the couch and execute a clumsy somersault in the process. His neck was spluttering blood beneath his hand. Emma and Victoria rolled away from the deadly fury of his knife. They cowered against the couch and begged for mercy. The intruder gasped, "You almost had me," and he hauled himself to his feet. Victoria had given him a hairline fracture in his shin, but he could still hobble along faster than Daniel, who was bleeding like a fountain as he drunkenly zigzagged his way to the door. The intruder caught up to him at the top of the stairs, and he shoved Daniel headfirst down the staircase. His neck snapped like a pencil on impact. He watched his own blood flow across the marble tiles as his vision faded to black. The intruder came limping back, with his mouth twisted into a horrible grin. He headed straight for James, who was writhing around on the floor with his guts bulging from his wound. The intruder leaned over him and grunted, "End of scene. Time to shut her down." The younger man's cries for help turned into a dreadful gagging sound as the intruder pushed the knife around his neck. James stared up at him with unbelieving eyes, his blood gushing onto the carpet in a stream. Within a few seconds, his gaze turned murky and dull, and then he was staring at nothing at all. Outside the mansion, the voice on the bullhorn was shouting for the intruder to reconnect the phone. It seemed strangely muted and distant, as if the world outside was no longer attached to the horrible events that were unfolding inside the mansion. The intruder looked over at Victoria and Emma and spat a wad of bloody mucus on the carpet. And then there were three. "Thank God it's almost over." Victoria closed her eyes tightly. "Don't give yourself up to the cops. Don't you dare. Just blow your brains out and remove yourself from this world, you piece of garbage. That's the plan." He hesitated, then turned to Emma. "I guess this isn't worth much, but I don't think you deserved any of this. I'm sorry that you were here. What about me? I didn't know you existed until after the book was released. I thought what they did was really lousy, and I wasn't the only one." His mouth twisted into a bitter little smirk. "Thoughts and prayers, huh? You're a famous writer, correct? You and the rest of them. You could have used your influence to pressure the publisher into doing the right thing. What were they going to do? Take the entire editorial board to court? I doubt it. But you didn't stick up for me, did you? You thought to yourself, geez, that sucks, and that's as far as it went. And that's exactly the problem here, Victoria. No one gives a damn about anyone else. Me. That's all I ever hear these days. I turn on the TV, I listen to the radio, I go online, and there it is. Me. That's all there is anymore. I don't want to live in a world like that. If we're all looking out for number one out there, what's the point of civilization then? What are you doing right now? You murdered all these people tonight because you didn't get what you want. How is that not selfish when in Rome? And he winced as he crouched down to fish the pistol out from beneath the couch. As he dropped out of view, Victoria uttered an anguished scream and ran for the window. At the same time, something smashed through the window from the outside and bounced off the floor. It was a flashbang grenade. It detonated directly in her screaming face. There was a tremendous boom and a brilliant flash of light. Victoria's brain was almost jellified by the concussive force of the blast, and her once beautiful features were scorched to the bone. She fell backwards and dropped like a brick to the floor. Emma found herself curled up on the floor with a dreadful buzzing in her skull. She shouted for help, but she could barely hear her own voice. The intruder staggered into view and shouted something, but his words were lost beneath the ringing in her ears. Emma tried to get up, but she was overwhelmed by a wave of nausea. Her head was aching like a rotten tooth, and her vision was scrambled from the glare of the flashbang. She squinted at the intruder's blurry form and saw the pistol in his hand. Emma struggled against the zip tie that bound her hands together, and she yelled, "Don't do it. Just put it down and let them take you away." Both of the entrances were busted down at the same time, and the SWAT team came pouring in from either side. The intruder turned to face them and raised his pistol. Emma watched as his body was riddled by a hail of bullets, and when the shooting finally stopped, Emma stumbled across the gore-smeared carpet and fell to her knees beside him. The police were shouting orders to her, but she couldn't hear them. Her entire world had shrunk down to a narrow view of the intruder, twitching like a fish out of water in a pool of his own blood. The intruder wasn't holding a pistol. It was still lost somewhere beneath the couch. He was holding the TV remote. He let it fall from his hand, and he mouthed a single word as the light faded from his eyes. Boom, and then he was gone. Emma was abruptly dragged to her feet by a set of clutching, uncaring hands. She let out an anguished scream and fought against them, dragging her heels across the floor as they pulled her outside. She was the sole survivor, the last little scumbag, and she couldn't bear to leave the others behind. Emma was still screaming when they loaded her into the ambulance. She screamed until she was sedated, and then she silently screamed in her nightmares. And for the rest of her days beneath the sun, a part of her would always be screaming because the void awaits us all. And when hope is extinguished, the shadows will consume you. It's cold in there, my friends, and it's dark. So very, very dark. I hope you enjoyed the first story. If you did, don't forget to leave a like. But if I didn't do my job well, feel free to give it a thumbs down. Either way, drop a comment and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, let's continue. I've received many questions about how I discovered my interest in horror writing, and I've realized that perhaps the best answer is also a story in itself. I had quite a few encounters with the unexplainable when I was younger. I always loved scary stories and devoured any horror film I was permitted to watch. This later transformed into a subtle disappointment, a feeling of betrayal almost, as I reached my teenage years without personally witnessing anything truly terrifying. That changed when we relocated. We'd always lived near the Black Sea coast, in flat, open landscapes. The Carpathian Mountains were distant silhouettes on clear days, mysterious and beckoning. I grew up completely accustomed to wandering in open fields and sparse woods. It was all relatively tame countryside. That was simply the nature of coastal Romania. The mountain region was completely the opposite. The Romanian Carpathians, at least around our new village, could probably be characterized best as a dichotomy. Villages were built in tight formation, with carefully maintained gardens and orderly streets. Meanwhile, right outside the outer ring of houses, drawn around the area almost like a defensive formation from ancient times, there immediately began completely wild, untamed forest. In our village, we called that abrupt division between civilization and wilderness the margin. Around the age of 14, we considered ourselves far too mature to be frightened of anything. But that sudden threshold between human domain and primordial forest still fascinated and terrified us. There was a watchtower back there, too, a kilometer or two into the forest. Left over from Ceausescu's era, it was well known in the village as being haunted. Besides its reputed aura of intense fear, its primary claim to infamy was a strange sound that could only be heard while inside. We resolved to enter that watchtower and discover, once and for all, the mystery of that sound. It was 7th grade, and I, having just moved, was attending a new school that I despised. My only friends were fellow outcasts. There was Adrian, the boy whose family had returned from working in Germany and spoke Romanian with an odd accent. Radel, who was permanently sarcastic and irritating. And our group's lone girl, Alina, who, according to rumors, had strange beliefs tied to old pagan customs that most villagers had abandoned generations ago. Misfits was an apt term for our group. And then there was me. Mihai, too intelligent for my own good, just cool enough to recognize how uncool I actually was, and more than a little angry at life in general. I was every teenager ever, now that I reflect on it. We crept across the margin in the middle of the afternoon. We weren't foolish enough to attempt it at night. Compared to my former home, the forest itself was completely different. Instead of sparse trees, with plenty of space between them and neat patches of grass, this forest was dense and ancient. This was not somewhere a person could simply stroll through casually. Worse, the Romanian Carpathians were filled with sudden ravines and steep slopes, formed through centuries of geological processes. Our parents frequently warned us with tales of the children who fell and perished, 1 or 2 annually, if their exaggerations were to be believed. So we moved through the tangled undergrowth with double apprehension. Passage was challenging enough that, once we reached the watchtower, we could have given ourselves excuses and returned home. But we didn't. This was, potentially, our ticket to some measure of acceptance among our peers. The watchtower stood at an odd angle, surrounded by younger trees and thick bushes. 4 ancient fir trees flanked the front, 2 on each side of the main entrance. The doorway looked disturbingly like a mouth, and the metal door hung partially open. We looked at each other for several minutes, daring one another to be the first, until a sudden drizzle forced our collective hand. We sought shelter beneath the concrete overhang from the unexpected rain. "Yes, that makes this much less creepy," Radel commented, watching the wall of rain sliding down from the watchtower's roof. The patter of rain on leaves reminded me of home, but the accompanying gloom made the structure that much darker. I peered through dusty windows, but saw nothing. Alina examined another window, apprehensive. "Boys first," Adrian just frowned and pushed the door. Surprisingly, it swung inward without resistance or sound. The interior of the watchtower sat like two dark planes above and below, a dim haze of dust. The rain outside had the whole place creaking and shifting. I was rather eloquent back then. "This sucks," nobody argued the point. We crept in at a snail's pace, testing each step as if something might leap out at any moment. Once all four of us were inside, Adrian let the door swing silently shut, and we froze, listening. The ebb and flow of the rain blanketed us with a current of sound. We heard a creak above, and then came a creak near the dust-covered desk in the room to our left. Riding adrenaline, bolting suddenly seemed like a good idea, before we made the collective decision to leave. There it was. "It's like standing near a hydroelectric plant," Alina whispered. "That low vibration you feel in your bones." Her description was the best way to explain it. The watchtower vibrated slightly, and a spike in the rumbling actually shook dust from the ceiling above. Shaking my head to clear the dust from my hair, I crept forward, following the rumble. The sound brought me to a gaping black doorway. Of course, the basement. Unhappily, we clustered around the stairs to the basement. Deeper gloom filled the base of the stairs, filtering through from small windows near the ceiling we'd seen from outside. "After you," Radel said. Making a face, I stepped carefully down, testing each concrete step. The structure itself seemed solid, even if I couldn't see clearly. I kept calm by telling myself they could see my silhouette against the basement's dim light and would get help if I fell. I froze at the base of the stairs. The rumbling was louder here, like distant thunder. I could feel a subtle vibration in my legs whenever the rolling murmur reached a crescendo. I noticed all that subconsciously, but it was what I saw that had me locked in place. Filtering swaths of dusty light fell through countless sharp objects. 3 military-grade pitchforks over there. Old Soviet-era harvesting equipment with rows of curved blades across from it. A bear trap on the wall, likely for catching poachers. Rusty shovels, hung machetes, every piece of communist-era agricultural equipment imaginable lay around at unpredictable angles. A hand grabbed my shoulder. "How's it look?" Radel asked, hunched over against the cobwebs we'd passed through. He looked around. "Oh, Domni Svint." He jumped as Alina bumped into him, and Adrian came up behind her. "This looks dangerous," Alina said. I agreed, but I hated it here in this village, the whole place. I wasn't about to let some creepy watchtower scare me off, especially not when the danger was completely mundane, as always. I wanted to be scared, wanted to encounter something supernatural, and I'd always been disappointed. "Well, just be careful," I said, moving forward. "The sound's closer here. Nobody's ever said anything about this basement, so we know we're further than they've ever been. Let's leave, take this discovery, It's already good for us, Adrian said, concerned. I looked back at him with a glare and shook my head before moving forward again. Alina moved past Radel and held onto my shoulder as I moved. It sounds like a waterfall. Yeah, it does, I replied, wondering if that was significant. I carefully slid around a jagged series of tools that had fallen from a rotting shelf. But that whole aura of fear thing the other kids talk about, there's none of that. Just this basement full of rusty communist junk, working their own way through the expansive, gloomy maze of rusty danger. Adrian and Radel followed the other side of the room, and then cut through the middle. Eventually, we all made it to the end of the basement, where the sound became quite loud. Wait, Adrian said, holding up a hand. He pulled a metal bar from something on a nearby post and poked at the floor. It fell away suddenly, a meter-wide gap appearing in the crumbling dirt and rock. The gap had been there already, just slightly less wide and invisible in the darkness. Now, with the edge crumbling away, we could barely see rain-filtered light down below, and little gushing rivulets of rainwater working their way down what looked like a 30-meter spillway. It's a drainage tunnel connected to the mountain stream, I realized aloud, picturing the local geography. That's the sound we're hearing, the underground river. You think that missing boy they never found got washed away down here? Radel asked, snickering. I stared down the hole from as close as I dared. Uneven, lined with boulders and steep drops, the sheer spillway seemed horribly lethal. Yeah, man. He might have died in the fall and then washed away by rain sometime later. Radel fell silent at that prospect. Alina gripped my shoulder tighter. Let's go, guys, we've done it. Let's get out of here. I stood tall to say something, and a sudden rush of fear hit me. My heart began pounding faster, and I felt an urge to flee, as if something was immediately behind me. Alina's grip on my shoulder became sharp and painful. What is that? Adrian asked, his voice shaking. I wasn't scared of anything specific. There'd been no prompt, no scary sight, no scary sound, and I knew what it was. It was the aura of fear the other kids swore was real. Struggling not to run for fear of the basement's maze of rusted blades and points, I held the others back and peered through the dim haze. You guys see anything? I asked, my breathing strained. The fear just kept rising, sharper and sharper, nearing panic. No, Radel responded, terrified. My body kept screaming at me that something was about to get me, that something was approaching, but I still saw nothing. Underneath the flood of fear, I felt a strange moment of excitement. This was what I'd wanted. I'd wanted to be afraid. Feeling contrary and eager, I closed my eyes, letting the fear surge exponentially. I even smiled for a moment. I opened my eyes, confused. I closed my eyes again. It was there again. I opened my eyes. It was gone again. I closed my eyes, now certain I was seeing the source of the inexplicable fear. I couldn't explain it, but I could only see it while my eyes were closed. Against the total blackness of my own eyelids, a horrible vision approached. It could only be described as a silhouette of monochrome spectral lines, flickering gray against black. Its outline in constant motion, it seemed to flash and jump in place. Clad in ethereal torn clothes and covered in gaping wounds, neck bones jutting from below a head permanently tilted against its shoulder. The corpse image took slow, shambling steps forward. I opened my eyes, and I couldn't see it anymore. By my best guess, it was halfway across the basement and moving toward us. "Domni Dumnizul, close your eyes," I whispered. "No," the other 3 kids shouted in unison. "Do it," I shouted back. They did, and I could see their strained control failing. The inexplicable fear had already been almost too much, but once they saw the thing coming for us. "We have to go," I said, feeling out of my own head. It was finally happening. I'd finally seen the supernatural, felt it, and the fear seemed to eliminate every other emotion. All I had left was a hammering heart and logic. "It's going to push us in the hole." That threat brought my friends back to clarity for a moment. "Go that way," I said, ordering Radel and Adrian to take the other side of the rusted maze. Tears sliding down his face, Adrian nodded, and the 2 of them went left. I took Alina and went right. Moving too fast, I almost ran bodily into the curled spines I'd seen earlier. Slowly, not daring to breathe, I stepped back. Closing my eyes, I looked for the flickering entity, and it was almost upon us, blocking our way forward. Back the other way at a dangerous pace, I tried the middle path. "Alina, where's it going?" She didn't want to close her eyes. "Look, please look," as we inched forward, narrowly avoiding a series of hanging blades. She clung hard to my back and moved her head around. It's close to Radel, and I heard Adrian cry out in pain. But I couldn't look. My eyes were on the bear trap hanging against the wall as we smoothly and slowly moved by it. If it snapped shut from the humidity or our motion or anything. Her head cleared the danger area, and she never realized what I'd moved her past. "It's coming back this way," she shouted in my ear. Closing my eyes for a look, I saw it reaching out for me, and I ducked, crawling forward and dragging Alina behind me. Covered in dirt, I reached the stairs, just in time to pull Radel forcibly by the back of his shirt and keep him from falling onto an upright pitchfork. They ran up the stairs, while I paused to close my eyes and look back. The thing leered at me from the middle of the basement, its sideways grin mocking me, as if to say, "You think you've gotten away." I ran then, too. Adrian had cut his arm, but other than that, we escaped unscathed. Our discovery led to an investigation by the village council, and the watchtower was demolished, and the drainage hole filled in the next year. We did win a certain amount of respect among the other kids for all that, which led to later explorations and even worse locations. But those are their own stories. Although I never told my friends what I'd seen in that last glance back. It was also the genesis of my interest in writing horror. There's more to this world than randomness and unfounded fears in the dark. If I hadn't been a perverse fear-seeker in that moment and closed my eyes, I might not be here today. I think it's important we honor the ancient tradition of sharing scary stories, because there are kernels of truth in these stories, and the strategies within might one day help someone escape from a horrible fate. Because, as that mocking glance told me, that ghastly thing had a will, a mind, and it was intelligent. I saw the elegance of the strategy in that moment. It made people afraid on purpose. Afraid people look around, they keep their eyes wide, and they don't close them. Remember that next time you feel afraid of the dark for no reason. Your instinct to look around, your instinct to stare at the darkness in fear, may be exactly what something is counting on. Prior to writing this all out, I never really suspected a possible connection with the incident at the watchtower, but I stopped sleeping right around that time. From 7th grade until my junior year of university, I would continue to stay up late every single night and sleep horribly if I slept at all. The culprits were many video games, a newfound love of energy drinks, a rising undercurrent of hatred for school, which felt increasingly like a prison, and a strong appreciation for the quiet void of night. I often walked through my village at night, and sometimes dared to venture toward the forest edge. The area was very safe, and the village council had recently built nice paths and wooden walkways that led down to the mountain stream. So sneaking out to walk around was more a product of boredom than any sort of fear-seeking. It was one of those nights, in the early autumn of 9th grade, that I saw something out in the forest. I was no fool. I immediately went home, intent on returning the next day. I actually slept well for once, excited for a Saturday trek to investigate what I'd seen. It had been almost 2 years since the incident at the watchtower, and life was starting to feel agonizingly bland again. I called to get the old band together, but Adrian had since gone back to Germany with his family. Radel arrived first. He seemed hesitant. He'd been a little skittish ever since our encounter at the watchtower. He'd often said he wished it hadn't happened. His sarcasm had quieted in the last 2 years. "I'm not going inside anything," he muttered without greeting. "No caves, no abandoned buildings, nothing." I nodded. "That's fine." Alina showed up a few minutes later with a broad smile. I'd only seen her once that summer, briefly, and she seemed older than I remembered somehow. This was certainly not the same strange girl from middle school. "What did you see?" she asked, excited. "He said it was blue," Radel responded, crossing his arms. "Yeah, I looked at the trail that led into the forest. A dim blue light in the distance, really hard to see, but definitely somewhere down by the stream. It hurt my eyes." She immediately headed for the trail. "Well, let's go then." We followed the easy trail along the left side of the ravine. The cut in the earth was deep and steep, but there were numerous wooden rails, and this was more a park than wilderness now. This was also not the main river, though a heavy creek did flow along the bottom, swelled by recent rains. The path on our side ended rather abruptly. The path on the other side of the ravine continued, accessible by bridge all the way back where we'd started, but it led away, heading toward the main river. "That's it then," Radel said, shrugging. "Can't go further." "Nonsense," Alina responded, sliding through the wooden rail. Radel rushed to the rail. "What are you doing?" I was a little concerned myself. "Look, it's not so steep here. There's roots and dirt, not just rock. It looks like other people go down this," she explained, working her way down. "Older kids probably come here to smoke." I laughed and slid through the rail. The steep dirt was made traversable by a few perfectly placed roots that jutted out like handholds. It was nerve-wracking climbing down, but I never felt in real danger. At the worst, if I fell, I would slide down the dirt painfully. "Come on," I yelled up to Radel. He followed only under protest, as he made abundantly clear for the entire climb down. Once down, I took stock of the surroundings. The ravine was about 15 meters high on either side, blocking out all but the immediate sounds of nature. The narrow dirt slope we'd slid down ended just below an abrupt waterfall basin. While quite beautiful, the waterfall made it impossible to travel in that direction. If the creek had been dry, we might have climbed the rock shelf. But for now, it was a loud wall of water spraying us with mist. No matter. I'd seen the strange blue light in the other direction, further down the ravine. I led, and we picked our way downstream, sticking to the sides where dry passage was possible. A few minutes in, a light pattering radiated from above and echoed from the high mossy walls. "No, not again," Radel shouted. Alina and I exchanged glances, both jumping to the same conclusion. The three of us rushed back to the dirt slope we'd come down on, trying to climb back up one at a time. But the drizzle was quickly turning the slope to muddy mush, and our attempts to escape only made it crumble further. Radel looked at me with accusation. "We're stuck," I shook my head. "We'll just have to walk out. This has to lead to the river eventually, right?" "Yeah," he replied, his voice rising to a trembling shout. "Past the thing." "What thing?" Alina asked, unhappy with being covered in mud, but otherwise unperturbed. "Whatever thing he found, whatever's out there all blue and glowy," he complained. "We should just sit here and wait for someone to come." "What if it gets dark first?" I asked, giving a test shout up at the walls. My own voice echoed back weakly. "They'll never hear us anyway." We had no choice. Sticking close together, we crept forward along old mossy rock. The high wall against my hand made me feel slightly safer. Meanwhile, the rain intensified, adding wet autumn chill to the gorge's naturally chilly air and the creek's spraying mist. My hands grew numb despite my best attempts to warm them, and we all began shivering soon after. "This is the worst thing that's ever happened, ever," Radel muttered. I gave no response, too wary of the ravine ahead. Thick accumulations of leaves carpeted whatever ground the swelled creek didn't cover. Ancient trees towered right up out of the ravine itself, none climbable, but all blocking the scant gray sunlight filtering through the rain clouds. Dark, freezing, possibly haunted. Yeah, Radel was right. This was the worst thing ever. I was loving it. "Hello," Radel screamed upward. I followed his eager gaze. We could see the back of a house, sitting on a sharp slope near the edge of the ravine. A ramshackle wooden fence seemed scant protection against falling immediately out the back door to one's death. We shouted for a few minutes, but there was no response. Radel went for one last shout at the top of his lungs and froze. A faint call, a hello perhaps, barely perceptible. It came from further down the ravine. Radel took 4 eager running steps forward and froze again. Right, we know how this works. I was as hesitant as he was, but Alina moved ahead. "We have no choice," she said flatly, shivering against the freezing drizzle. We moved with caution, trying to scout every possible hiding location. But the tangled undergrowth, huge trees, and rushing creek made total certainty impossible. She held onto my shoulder and alternated walking with her eyes closed, just in case, but she saw nothing. The rain surged, and it became very difficult to see in the misty gloom. "Hello," came a distant call, barely audible over the loud roar of the rain. Something sounded off about that voice. We came to an abrupt wall of darkness. Peering at it in dismay, we realized that the thickening trees and narrowing ravine had combined to plunge the area ahead into total blackness. Radel had an expression of regret and fear that I agreed with wholeheartedly. but there was nothing else to do but go through. "Hold on and don't let go, no matter what," I said, taking the lead. Thunder rumbled overhead as we moved into the darkness. I could hear the creek burbling and flowing to my left, and I could feel the mossy rock to my right, chilly to the touch. The rain roaring above, sometimes dripping on us in thick streams funneled by leaves. "Hello," the voice was much clearer, and had a quick echo behind it, as if whoever had shouted was near the opposite wall of the ravine, in the darkness with us. "Is it someone else?" Radel whispered. I squeezed his arm painfully to keep him quiet, and Alina's hand squeezed painfully against my shoulder. I looked over. At some indeterminate distance in the pitch black, a little blue orb seemed to coalesce. It was an eerie blue, the kind I'd seen the night before and never elsewhere, the kind I would not see again until years later, when certain LED lights would come out, with new hues that seemed otherworldly to the eye. "Bunaziwa," the voice came again, and the little blue orb rotated. Another orb came into view, this one purple and negative, as if it was some kind of anti-light, painful to behold. They were some sort of eyes. Dim, otherworldly blue and purple floated across the wall of the ravine as those eyes searched, ever so faintly illuminating whatever they looked at. We ducked in unison, hiding behind a large boulder as the bizarre light passed over our spot. "Hey, come check this out," the voice called. The dissonance was intense. The voice sounded like an average young male, possibly a female. It was hard to tell. But it sounded human. The thing began to move, searching further. From the faint light of its eyes, I guessed that it was 2 or 3 meters in height. We slowly circled the rock as it passed, and then bolted further into the black, scrambling and falling and running. The idea was implicit. The dark area had to widen soon, had to reach the river sometime. We just had to get there. We froze together. "Hello, Bunaziwa. Hey, come check this out. Ai Unlayu. Hello." A dozen voices sounded in the darkness ahead. We watched a rapid series of eerie blue and anti-purple eyes open in random places, all leering about, searching for us. Their combined light was just enough to see vague outlines. Faintly opaque shadows flowed from beneath their impossible eyes, each vaguely human, ranging from 1 to 1.5 meters tall. The ravine flashed with a dim menagerie of color, the display moving closer to us by the moment. "Hello," it was the first voice, from behind us coming back our way. Crouching in the darkness, numb, freezing, miserable, and terrified, it was the perfect time to panic. The only choice was whether we should run back, trying to get past the largest one, or forward, into the darkness, past the dozen smaller ones. I grabbed and ran back, pulling Alina along, but Radel darted the other way, tearing out of my grasp as he bolted forward. There was no time. Splashing straight up the slippery creek, stumbling and pressing forward, I received a dozen scrapes and bruises, but "hello" kept calling from behind us, seemingly a little closer each time, even as we ran at full speed. The rain had become a torrential downpour by the time we reached the mud slope and the base of the shelf waterfall. We tried to climb up, but spilling water made it impossible, and our hands were numb besides. Rolling thunder mocked our shouts for help. Thinking quickly, Alina used the water to scrape the mud away with her hand, exposing sharp rocks and more of the roots. Able to grip them at the cost of cuts and scrapes, We worked our way up, constantly looking back for the strange eyes and the parroted human calls. But we seemed to have lost it. That climb was far more dangerous than the climb down, and I thought that I might fall and break bones at any time. But we made it. We ran along the edge, staying well away for fear the rain would sweep us over, or that loose rock might collapse. We could have gone the other way, running for home, but Radel was still down there. We passed over the dark area. From this angle, it seemed wholly unnatural. The dim rain-filtered light seemed to just stop somewhere in the air below. She screamed down periodically as we ran. Radel, we left the unnatural dark area behind, following the ravine as it widened. We could see the river in the distance. "Right here, guys," we heard Radel yell from halfway up the ravine wall. Alina ran for the sound of his voice, and abruptly choked on her jacket as I pulled her hood with all my might. Dangling over a sudden cleft that dropped away to sharp rocks, she flailed her arms. She carefully angled her feet in the slippery mud and pushed back, recovering with my help. Stunned, she backed away. This was almost the same fate we'd escaped once before. "Right here, guys," the Radel voice yelled again. "Right here, guys." Her jaw trembling, she leaned over and looked. I peered over too. At first, we saw nothing, but a few moments passed, and the thing must have realized the deception had failed. Blue and purple lights appeared, gazing up at us for a moment, and then a vague, shadowy, huge form moved away. Alina gagged. The thing was dragging a brutally bloodied mess of flesh. I shook her arm. "It's a deer," I whispered. Peering through the driving rain, I could just see Radel's blue jacket in the distance, stomping through water at the mouth of the ravine and waving his arms frantically at someone. He'd made it. "Go get him," I told her. "Make sure he's all right." Confused, she argued for a moment, but then did as I asked. I headed back down the edge of the ravine alone, finding the inexplicable dark zone. Lying on my stomach in the mud, I crept up and peered over the edge. Just like the ghost thing from the watchtower, I had to look back. I had to know. Illuminated by faint ghastly eyelight, I watched the dozen smaller forms throw pieces of the deer about, noisily fighting and consuming bits of it with glee. My gaze traveled past them as I realized that I was being watched in turn. The largest form sat by itself, its blue and purple eyes on me. Without looking away from me, it tore a leg from the deer carcass and threw it to the others. A minute later, the darkness seemed to swirl, mixing about like a fog. The entire area of blackness cleared between blinks, and I found myself staring down at trees, leaves, and water, natural ravine, indistinguishable from anywhere else on our path, if not for the deer bones. Lying stark white and picked clean, they were scattered about with abandon, some shattered for their marrow. Lying in the mud, rain running down my face, struggling to comprehend everything that had just happened. I had the strangest notion. I just witnessed a family rest stop. Halloween came soon after our incident at the ravine, and the season was a fantastic one for me. I'd been inspired. The flickering ghost at the watchtower could have just been a once-in-a-lifetime encounter. But the strange beings passing through the ravine near our village proved that the supernatural was real. It was my dream as a horror fan, and now a spinner of my own tales, come true. My position as a high school freshman seemed to be rising. I wasn't integrated into any groups per se, but became more of a freelancer, known for a heavy energy drink habit and telling intense, scary stories. My reputation and subtle distance from everyone else suited me just fine. High school was just this concrete-walled place I attended for 8 hours a day. It was not just a metaphor for prison. It was a prison. I was bored out of my mind most of the time, and thoroughly enjoying messing with people through horror stories. The Halloween season made them extra vulnerable to fear. I wasn't sure where things would go once the season passed, and scary stories fell out of favor, but I was having fun with it. Until out of nowhere, Alina suddenly started dating a football player. Radel and I were not speaking. We'd had a falling out after the incident at the ravine. He'd been depressed and morose ever since. That left Alina and I briefly, until Dragos entered the picture. I hadn't even been aware she talked to anyone from the sports crowd, let alone found them interesting enough to date one. My stories took on a darker, angrier tone. I also joined the football team midseason, although I literally had no idea how to play. I wasn't extremely terrible for a freshman, but my presence certainly irked Dragos. I more than made my dislike clear. Our rivalry reached a breaking point in November, near the end of the football season. The final encounter began after a football practice ended. Most everyone else had gone home, but I still lingered in the school's front hall, resting up for the walk home. Radal stumbled through the main doors, shoved from behind. Dragos came in behind him, followed by 2 of his cronies and Alina. I frowned at her, and she gave a concerned expression of apology. Radal here says it's you, Dragos accused, doing his best to tower over me. I glared back at him, not about to back down from his attempted intimidation. "What's me? I've heard all about your little stories," he responded, his tone mocking. "Alina talks you up all the time. But Radal here, he says they're real. That it's you. You've convinced these 2 that your stories are real." Radal shoved away Dragos' grip and grimaced at me. "Sorry, but what I said was, I just think sometimes you tell stories that are too real. People can get confused. Though I didn't show it, I felt a little dismayed. But if that was what Radal had to believe to feel better about the encounters, I guess I couldn't blame him." Dragos interrupted. "I'm just tired of everyone listening to you like you're somebody. You're just a freshman. You're nobody." He stepped even closer. "So let's hear it. Scare us. Find us a real ghost. Or make us believe some story. I don't think you can do it." His aim was to embarrass me in front of Alina. That much was obvious. But I'd had it with his nonsense, and I was already full of anger and resentment from too many other things. I stared him down. "All right, don't," Radal began to plead, but Dragos shoved him aside. I took in a slow breath and closed my eyes. The story-spinning craft I'd been developing had fine-tuned my awareness. Horror seemed empowered by details, by surroundings, and the environment. I was constantly aware of little sounds, or certain spaces. I pulled these things to me, collecting them, testing them against a taut string in my chest, my sense of fear, which I'd learned to adjust to mimic my audience's reactions. I opened my eyes, a little confused. More than a few times, I'd sensed gaps in the world around me. Certain spots gave off what could only be described as nothing. They were emotionally blank. This sensation threw me off and disrupted my sharp anger. Shaking my head, I walked slowly down the hall, feeling the fear reaction in me start up again, rising as I walked. I followed it like a dowsing rod. "Where's he going?" one of Drago's friends asked. "Shut up, man, just follow him." It sounded as if, at least for the moment, Drago's was actually engaged. They walked behind me as I felt myself led to the school library. Uncertain what was happening, I grabbed a book from the quiet shelves. The library felt strange without anyone inside it, lit only by dim November afternoon filtering through the windows. Following my lead, they each grabbed a book. I sat at a table in the middle of the room. They sat on either side of me, forming a long row. Drago's made sure to sit next to me, a snide look on his face. I raised the book to my face, blocking most of my forward vision. They did the same, confused. One of the guys laughed. Radel looked pained, while Alina on the other side of Drago's seemed excited. What was I doing? Where was this going? With each action, the responsive fear in me had grown a little stronger. Why was the dim, empty library filling me with fear? I felt around the logic of the room with my mind. Attracted by an active imagination, attracted by the act of imagination, it approaches slowly. It uses an angle visually blocked by the book itself. It depends on the reader being immersed and absorbed. They quieted, suddenly aware that none of us could see forward. So far, it has been content with keeping a low profile, by restricting itself to subtly draining the victim's psyche and will. It leaves them tired and sore after a few hours, even though they were just sitting there reading. You might recognize that feeling. The body's normal defense mechanism is a periodic look around, with an inexplicable sense of something amiss. Drago's frowned. His two friends exchanged glances. A rising sense of vulnerability overtook the group. I could tell they wanted to drop their books and look. That periodic momentary awareness sends it running, for a time, preventing serious mental damage. But now, 6 potential victims at the same table are ignoring that impulse, keeping their books up, refusing to answer their fear. And it begins to wonder, do these 6 know? It begins to feel threatened. It begins to wonder if it should use its precious energy to lash out at one. But which one? It flickers closer, approaching the back of one of the books. Alina tensed. Radel looked extremely unhappy. I could feel the group's emotions rising to a sharp point as the overpowering sense of something approaching behind our books became unbearable. I thought I could even hear the barest hint of something winding up, preparing to strike. Drago slammed his book on the table, loudly disrupting the moment. Although he seemed subtly shaken, he put on a show of anger. This is nonsense. There's nothing here. It's the school library. Come on, we lowered our books. I looked around, eyes narrowed. The rising note of fear had flitted away, reduced to a subtle lurking tension somewhere distant. Look, Drago's continued. If you can't deliver, fine, I stood. Filled with anger, I slammed a hand flat on the table. But you asked for it. Imbuing the taut sense in my heart with a surge of fire and dark intent, I followed it out of the library and into the hall. It led us quickly to the large, open gymnasium. Shrouded in darkness, the windowless space arched over us. A chill, flowing void lit only by a spike of light from the hallway doors. "So there's two hauntings in the school?" Dragos asked, unimpressed. I shook my head. The horrible floating thing in the library didn't feel like a ghost. "I think they're quite numerous, but content to remain subtle and unseen, feeding on the minds of unsuspecting readers. I think the worst thing that could happen with those is looking up without warning and accidentally seeing one, unless you frighten it and it lashes out." I drank in the sensations of the gym's vast blackness and quiet, comparing the texture to that first encounter in the watchtower basement. "And this doesn't feel like a ghost, either. This is something else." I didn't mention the anger I felt reflected back at me. Radel shook his head, highly unhappy, but Dragos pushed him along with us. We began trekking across the gym, sinking deeper into inky darkness. Our shoes echoed weirdly against the smooth floor, squealing occasionally. Nervous laughter made a round through the group, as it became harder to see one another. Our pace slowed as the darkness grew nearly complete. I could only see them out of the corner of my eye, and we began stumbling forward, wondering when the opposite wall of the gym would suddenly bump into us. "We're not supposed to be here," Radel moaned. "We'll never reach We came up against the opposite wall." Oh, Elena looked back. "Does that seem really far away to you?" Indeed, the two tiny squares of light in the hallway doors seemed oddly small and distant. The others were only the barest silhouettes in the corner of my vision. "It's just a dark gym," Drago said dismissively. "There's a circle of darkness," interrupted one of the squares of light in the distance. The silhouette of a head disappeared as quickly as it came. While we peered at the doors, one opened and shut, spilling a wide arc of light across the floor, a brief light that somehow failed to reach us at all. "Who was that?" one of the guys whispered. "There's nobody else here. A janitor or something," the other guy whispered back. "Why would he be walking around in here in the dark?" Elena asked. "It's not a janitor. It's something horrible," Radel muttered. "Shut up," Dragos whispered. Slow steps echoed somewhere ahead, to our right. Heavy, flat, they sounded 4, 5, 6 times. And stopped. We kept still, straining our ears. Lighter footfalls echoed from somewhere to our left, a rapid series that ended as quickly as they began. Silence fell again. "Screw this," Radel whispered, frantic. "I am out of here." "Good plan," one of the guys whispered, before being punched in the shoulder by Dragos. We worked our way slowly and quietly down the wall, unable to see anything, but remembering that a door at the end led straight outside. The painful tension only rose as the silence in the gym continued, offering no explanation for the 2 pairs of footsteps or the shadow that had entered the darkness before that. If someone else was in the void with us, they were sitting still, listening, waiting. A whisper sounded near my ear, about 3 inches away. "Hello?" The voice was gruff, older. I froze mid-step as warm, foul breath flowed across my ear. No one else in the group made a sound. My heart beat like a hammer, each beat dragging across the moment like a knife. I had a brief terror that it was the largest shadow creature from the ravine. It had stared back at me as I'd watched it, and now it had finally found me. The lighter steps exploded to our left, and somebody slammed their way out through the dark doors on that side. "Damn," the voice next to me muttered, and the heavier footfalls erupted from next to me, racing after the first set. We stayed frozen as the doors on the side of the gym slammed open a second time. "What was that?" Dragos asked. It occurred to us that somebody might actually be in trouble. As a group, we rushed after the footsteps, following a girl's scream echoing through the halls in response to our commotion. Dragos and his buddies sprinted ahead as we rounded a corner, grabbing and beating someone. Miriam, a junior girl I recognized from student politics, cowered against the wall. Terrified, she just kept screaming. The brawl split, and the man bolted down the hall. Dressed in rough sweaters and a cap, the vagrant glared back at us for a second, muttering something incoherent. He pushed through the front door, which we had left propped slightly open, so as to wait inside after football practice instead of out in the cold. We were left stunned, confused, shaking, but all right. The next day, we were subject to a series of lectures and interrogations about the incident. Nobody had been hurt, strictly speaking, but Miriam, staying after school for a project, had been scared half to death. None of us mentioned how we happened across her pursuer. Highly disturbed by what had happened, Dragos and his buddies left me alone after that. The one positive from the event was that Radel began speaking to me again. He found me in study hall, reading a book. "Every time," he said quietly, so that nobody else would hear our conversation, "you seek these things, and there they are." A little shaken by the vagrant's attack myself, I just shrugged. "Yeah, but that wasn't supernatural." "No," Radel replied. "You know Alexandru had to go home this morning. He had a panic attack, freaked out." I frowned. The kid was a known and annoying hypochondriac. Poor Alexandru. He said he saw something that had attacked him while he was reading in the library. I put my book down and slid it away, regarding it with sudden horror. Radel leaned in close, his eyes grim. "But you didn't tell anyone else that story." We couldn't be certain that I truly had some uncanny ability to seek and uncover the supernatural. But the next move was clear. Forget about it. Whether or not our encounters were purely bad luck, they were certainly growing closer to home and more dangerous. If things had gone a little differently during the vagrant's attack, Miriam might have been hurt. Or worse, and the school library had become a permanent center of rumor and uneasiness. Alexandru had told people what he'd seen, and the students' wariness seemed to make the situation worse. Panic attacks began striking random students every week or so. Whether it was their own fears run wild, growing worse with each new panic attack story, the hysteria feeding on itself, or whether it was agitation of the otherwise harmless entity that roamed there. It was impossible to say. Either way, my concern for the effect my fear-seeking was having on the people around me finally exceeded my inner resentment of school and the life I felt forced to slog through. Still sleeping poorly and staying up far too late, I let my unending weariness dull my fear-tuned senses and drain my excitement for horror. I put it all aside and got on with the circus of insanity that high school managed to perpetuate all by itself. Turned out I loved football. I joined the team just to conflict with Dragos, but he and Alina broke up, and we became amicable teammates. The longer nothing weird happened, and the longer I refused to think about horror or tell stories, the more everything faded. The very public stories of the watchtower, beyond the forest, and the vagrant's attack became humorous memories. They lost their realness, and I became regarded as a normal teenager, for better or worse. Nothing of relevant note happened for nearly 2 years. I'd become wholly engaged in the constant battle for fulfillment and position that high school entailed, even if I didn't seek the same groupthink that everyone else seemed to. I based my reputation, as always, on being set against and apart from everything else. Alina chose the opposite route. Her dating a football player was not a one-time thing. This often set us at odds in subtle and unhappy ways. Radel slowly got over the things that had happened by pretending they hadn't. He followed a similar path to Alina's by pursuing leadership in band, the math team, the chess team, and student government. This led to a latent but powerful strain between the three of us. By the time the homecoming dance of 11th grade rolled around, I had my driver's license, and Radel had been dating Alina for a week. That bothered me for reasons I obviously couldn't vocalize. I had a girlfriend of a month at the time, so it shouldn't have mattered, but on the surface, we were all still the best of friends. Per the plan for the dance, I picked the two of them up. My girlfriend's house was the next stop. Clad in rented suits, Radel and I bantered back and forth, both attempting an Al Pacino accent and throwing out Scarface quotes. While extremely pretty in her dress, Alina stayed quiet, looking out the window. The evening was a little nippy with mid-October chills, and Halloween season was upon us. But I ignored it all, intent on driving safely and having a good time. Do we really have to pick up Iona? Alina suddenly asked, referring to my girlfriend. We should just go to dinner ourselves. I laughed, a small negative undercurrent beneath my positive exterior. I'd almost expected something like this the moment she got in the car. Yes, we do have to pick her up. She's just kinda stupid, you know, she continued. I've been meaning to say, you're really smart, and she's just not. I don't think you two are a good fit. Not this again, Radel interrupted, darkly unhappy. You do this to every girl he's interested in. She threw her hands up. Not my fault if he goes after the stupid ones. I glared at her in the rearview mirror. Stop whatever. She went back to looking out the window. I pulled to a stop and went to Iona's front door while they argued in the car. She looked amazing in her dress, better than Alina, in fact, and she knew it. She was a cheerleader and prided herself on her appearance, and Alina was right. Although unmotivated because I hated school, I was very smart, and Iona and I often had moments of total misunderstanding and confusion. But she was a fine person. I often told myself that she was a good person. Once back in the car, it took about 3 minutes before she got in a fight with Alina, both girls exchanging veiled, sarcastic comments. The subtle arguments and stinging comments continued through dinner at the restaurant, slowly involving Radel and I as well, despite our best efforts to calm everyone down. Dinner was a blur of unhappiness. By the time we left there, heading for the dance, night had fallen, bringing with it an uncanny darkness. Clouds covered the moon. As I drove, filled with anger, annoyance, and negativity, I started noticing again. The same things I found creepy about the Romanian landscape had not changed now that I was in a car. Although new places had sprung up in the last few years, it seemed there would always be the same underlying layout, a vast sprawl of interconnected dense pockets. They could be strip malls, villages, clusters around highway exits. But there was always untamed land in the spaces in between. There were always random fields and forests. On one side of the road could be a massive modern development, and on the other, centuries-old wilderness. My unhappiness and anger seemed to rise to a keening note as the car filled with shouts, and Alina and Iona began pushing at each other around the passenger seat. I felt it coming up ahead, a particular spot on the right side of the road, among the overhanging trees. We were in between villages, driving through dark forest, and a very specific location up ahead seemed a little darker than the others, filling me with the most powerful reaction I'd ever had. Abruptly, dangerously, I braked hard and pulled off of the road, squealing to a sliding, forceful stop in the rough dirt. "Stop," I shouted at the top of my lungs, the single word lasting a good 10 seconds. I only let the yell fade when I ran out of breath. Iona, Radel, and Alina all went silent, stunned by my uncharacteristic outburst. I stared forward, making no further move for a moment. Little dots appeared on the windshield, and I could see flickering lines of rain falling through my headlights' beams. The stunned moment passing, I sensed Alina looking around. "What did you do?" she asked, peering out the window. I heard her breathing quicken. "What did you do?" Radel put his forehead against his window, suddenly concerned. You don't think my gaze traveled further up the headlights' rain-flickering beams, out to the sturdy, high trees ahead. The darkness out there set the sense inside me vibrating with an almost physical force. I felt uneasy. It wasn't the trees ahead that were the problem. Turning around, I gazed through the back window with dismay. The eerie red light from my brake lights illuminated thick trees behind us, too. "What?" Iona asked. "He just pulled off the road because you're being a cadia. Stay in the car." Alina interrupted, opening her door slowly. Why?" Iona began to ask. Alina hissed at her. "Stay in the goddamn car. Don't go out there," Radel breathed, but she didn't listen. I opened my door and stepped out as well, leaving my fancy dress jacket inside. "Where are we?" she asked, looking over the roof at me. I shook my head. I didn't know. Old-growth trees surrounded us, but an open carpet of leaves ran under them, completely devoid of the tangled undergrowth that should have been there. This forest was more like the ones I remembered from classic Carpathian fairy tales, filled with thick, ancient trees that made undergrowth impossible. Even worse, the road was nowhere to be seen. Alina held her hand up, feeling the light rain that filtered through a gap in the trees high above. Further out, we could hear heavier drops of accumulated water falling from leaves. The sound came from all around us, audible over the grumbling of my car's engine. "So what?" she demanded. "Is this some parallel nightmare reality? Or did we go back in time or something?" "What did you do?" "I don't know," I shot back, my anger slowly turning into an uncontrollable smile as I thought about it. Despite myself, I couldn't help but laugh. But that would be freaking awesome. Her cheeks shot up around a sudden massive grin. It would be, wouldn't it? Radel emerged from the car, glaring darkly at the two of us. "What's so funny?" Iona popped her door open and completed the over-the-roof circle of conversation. "What's going on? Where's the road?" I peered into the darkness, able to discern a few outlines, dark against black. "Looks like there's a hill over there," so we should go climb it and look for the road. Yeah, Alina added, excited. Let's go off into the woods. I suppose we should split up too, Radel groaned. Iona glared at him. Hell no, I pulled the keys out, silencing my car but leaving the lights on, fighting down a constant grin born of excitement at my own fear. I led the way between the trees, sticking to the long beam from my car's headlights. Without the rumbling sound from the engine, the forest became much louder, radiating the sound of shifting leaves, falling drops, and an occasional unexplained snap or crack from somewhere in the darkness. Each scary sound had Iona gripping my arm. I felt quite manly for as long as the headlights lasted, but the beams faded with distance, and we were forced to let our eyes adjust before moving into pitch darkness. My only hope was that some sort of road would be visible from up the slope, lit by streetlights or buildings or something. Something snapped to our left. I had sudden flashbacks to the pitch-black gymnasium, and waiting in terrified silence as something horrible crept up near my face. I had the sudden urge to abandon the trek to the hill and run back to the car. But we'd still be stuck in the middle of unknown forest. Radel, just watch our left, I ordered, creeping forward into the darkness. Alina, watch the right. Iona, scream if you see anything. Weird, she squeezed my arm harder. I was planning on it. As I grew used to the darkness, I found myself barely able to make out forms and shapes, lit by the barest moonlight filtering through clouds and canopy. I had to keep moving my head from side to side, using the corners of my vision to detect the slightest changes in dark and black. Radel backed up against me. Chris Domney, we looked to the left as a group. I saw nothing strange at first, until I noticed a distinct branch resting at an odd angle. It was noticeably bright red, even in the dark, and rather rotted. I tilted my head, curious. It moved, disappearing behind a tree. I grabbed Iona's mouth to muffle her scream. It had been a leg. Back to the car, Radel hissed through clenched teeth. No, I replied, making the hard call. Forward. Just run, they listened, and we ran as a group. The flat landscape, covered in wet leaves, made for easy running and even easier slipping. Several times, someone fell, and we hurriedly picked them up and continued running. The sounds of snapping nearly matched us, slowly falling behind, now including a strange hissing, breathing sound. The ground's angle turned up, and we pounded up, reaching the crest of the hill. Lights, Alina pointed. She was right. Off in the distance, we could see an unidentifiable building and a brightly lit gas station. And a road. The hill led back down, and we ran at full speed, until I noticed gaps on the horizon to our left and right. The chilly wind tipped the rest of the group off. No, 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 Radel shouted. A river. No, a wide, flat, murmuring black plain lay between us and the distant gas station. A dozen crackling and breathing sounds came from several places in the woods behind us. I can't swim, Iona said, depressed. You can't, Alina asked, a note of panic in her voice. Iona sighed. It'll ruin my dress. Alina's concern dropped to a flat, stony expression. I'll fix that. She bent down, scooped up some mud, and threw it at the squealing girl. Problem solved. Now get in the river. Heart pounding, I followed Iona's terrified shrieks into the water, and Alina and Radel splashed in after me. The ice-cold water brought pain, and a certain irresistible terror. I never liked swimming in anything that wasn't a pool, because I'd always imagine horrible things in the deep, waiting for a chance to grab my legs. But there was no choice now. Struggling to stay as high up in the icy black as I could, I swam after Radel and Alina, who had passed me during my initial hesitation. A low sound similar to a chuckle flowed over me from behind. Unable to resist the urge, I looked back. Silhouettes of misshapen, rotting things slid under the water from the shore, pursuing us from the woods. I couldn't be sure, but they looked like mauled corpses, moving in impossible, ungainly ways, mostly an assortment of animals, but one vaguely human. The split skull of the humanoid sank beneath the black plane of the water, staring at me with a rotted, horrible grin. I had the distinct impression that it somehow knew my unreasonable fear of the water, and it was more than eager to make it come true. "Go, go," I shouted ahead, splashing after the others. Truly completely terrified for the first time in my life, I fought my numbing limbs to swim as fast as I could, cursing my restrictive dress clothing. There was no way to know whether the horrible rotting things were catching up to us in the water. Ahead of the three of us, Iona screamed. Tiring and only halfway across, we swam up to the spot where she thrashed and struggled. "My leg," she shouted. I dove under while Radel and Alina tried to keep her from being pulled under. The freezing shock against my face almost had me breathe in water, but I fought against it and fought my keening terror to swim down. I could feel rushing emptiness all around me, the dark and chill increasing below, into unknown depths. Fingers. It was fingers. A bony, slimy hand had a grip on her ankle. Surging with adrenaline, I did the only thing I could think of. I gripped 2 fingers in each hand and pulled apart. The hand ripped in half. I could feel the rotting flesh giving way, sinew by sinew. Iona kicked away, and I thrashed for the surface. "They're in the water," I shouted, but the group was already screaming and swimming for their lives. The things under the water gripped at us and swatted for our limbs, but we were almost there. Corpse silhouettes emerged from the water ahead, waiting and watching us expectantly. We were forced to stop and tread water, a profound despair falling over us. "We can't get out. We can't escape," Radel breathed, looking over at me. "I'm sorry for being a terrible friend." Totally numb, I shook my head. "It's fine, man. What are those things?" Iona asked, her voice shaking. "Why are they after us?" "It doesn't matter," Alina said, shivering. "They've got us." I watched the humanoid corpse as it gazed at us. It just stood there on the shore, grinning. "No, there's one more thing." I looked at the 3 of them as they tread and shivered. "Are you scared?" "Yes," Iona shouted, terrified and angry, but Radel and Alina just nodded. I drew in a breath, letting the cold fill me. "Then let's just float downriver for a little, see what comes up." Never felt anything quite like those moments. Mortal danger was a thing in those moments, and it didn't overwhelm me anymore, didn't frighten me. The situation seemed grim. The corpse things shambled along the shore, trailing us. They knew the cold would get us very soon. I wondered at their origin, their motivations, but it wasn't their story that mattered. I let my senses flood. The chill night breeze, the slight pattering rain, the deadly icy water we floated in, serene and despairing. And those curious blank spots in my awareness, still there, even years later, gaps in my simulated fears, emotional dead spots, just a few, all on one side of the river near the gas station. Ignoring them, I focused on my animalistic terror of deep, unknown water. I could feel it up ahead as we drifted downriver, waiting for us. "Cross back the other way," I rasped, breathing too hard to yell. Nodding, too exhausted and cold to argue, they began swimming toward the forested shore. The humanoid corpse gave another low, disgusting laugh, and the rotting things slid back into the water, intent on beating us to the other shore and waiting for us there. The back and forth would continue until we had no more strength left. A wave of pressure in the water moved up against my body, and I cringed away, terrified. Back, back, the others followed, and we swam away from the middle, back towards the gas station. A great flailing and splashing erupted behind us, but none of us had the energy to look. We scrambled ashore, breathing desperately and struggling to recover. Iona and Radel stumbled for the gas station, without hesitation. As always, I looked back, and this time, Alina stopped and looked too. A barely discernible depression in the water whirled the black with uncanny force. "What is it?" Alina asked, grabbing my wrist. I shook my head. "A sinkhole under the river. Some sort of creature, hiding under there, feeding on animals. I don't know. Either way, it scared me. I've always been scared of the deep. Another few feet forward, and we'd be down there too. But how'd you know? How'd you know it was there?" I had no explanation. Just like that, the danger was over. Our terrified flight in the dark had left my heart pounding and my body on edge, but we'd survived. I just stood there with Alina for a few minutes, trying to recover. Radel came running back, horrified. It's worse than you can imagine." Alina squeezed my wrist. "God, what is it? Where are we? Is it a nightmare world?" I thought it might be. He gulped and widened his eyes. "Worse. We're in Moldova, you asshole." I pushed him, laughing. He immediately dropped the act and began cracking up. "I had you. For once I had you." Alina just shook her head and smiled broadly, still shivering. Recovering control, he looked back. "That building beside the gas station, it's auto repair. The owner will help us tow our car to the road. We're near somewhere called Balti and the Dniester River." The drive back took over 5 hours. Iona was angry the entire way. "We missed homecoming," she kept complaining, as if that was somehow important compared to the night's events. Radel had a big map, out the mechanic had given him. "This river splits a few times, but it runs all the way up near where we live back in Romania. Think that's important?" "Weird," I responded, my eyes on the road. "I don't think so, unless you're afraid of potential river monsters. It could always come up the river and—" "Wait, is it the river? The one the ravine runs to? And the school is near it, and the watchtower beyond the forest was, I can't tell." "Oh. Well, I did also live in Moldova before I moved to Romania. I recognized this kind of forest immediately." Radel stared at me through the rear-view mirror. "You mean you know the area?" "No, never been here. I mean the details, the landscape. We turned off the road in Romania and ended up somewhere else in the world. But it was somewhere you were familiar with. What's the chance of that?" Alina wiped dried mud from her dress and leaned forward, grinning. "Can we play with this now? I've been waiting years. It's obvious you can't ignore it now." We could have died out there, I countered, looking over at Iona, sleeping unhappily in the passenger seat. Bedraggled and dirty, she'd had no idea what she was involved in. And yet, she'd been just as endangered as the rest of us. Maybe, Alina replied, still eager. But the mystery is there, whether you want it or not. It's time to figure out what's really going on. I shrugged, turned up the heat, and rolled down the window to run my senses across the passing landscape. I contemplated the history at hand. All the things that happened, how they'd started, how they'd played out. Was any of this even real? Were we just sharing intense imaginings? Radel drew in a sharp breath. Something squirmed in my lap, having fallen out of some tuck in my ruined dress clothes. I thrashed around, reaching for it as I tried to keep the steering wheel stable. Grabbing the disgusting thing and lifting it with a horrified stare. I hurled the moldy, red, rotting finger out the open window. I drove, while Alina sat in the passenger seat and Radel lounged in the back. We'd spread out the maps and drawn up a dozen theories. What if it was all somehow connected to the river? Or was it me? And was I just finding these things, or somehow making them happen? Our first task was to isolate the river variable. And so we drove, heading for hills where people often went to hike. Far from our hometown, if anything untoward happened, we would know the river was not part of it. I'd been to the hills, often when my family first moved to the area. They were uneven, forested, and full of random cliffs and geographical oddities. But well-marked paths made the popular area safe for hiking. It was Saturday as well, so we saw more than a few families with small children readying themselves for hikes. The parking lot was crowded with cars, and I wondered if this area could possibly hide anything horrible. The moment we hit the trees, and the sun disappeared behind heavy canopy, I could feel it. That way, Radel sighed. I was hoping you wouldn't say that. What's it feel like? Alina asked. I took a moment to listen to the breeze overhead. The leaves moved with rhythm, and dappled sunlight brought uneven warmth through the otherwise cool mid-October air. The logic and feel of the area felt different. I don't think it's dangerous, I thought aloud. I think it's strange, but not dangerous. Awesome, Radel said with a smile, looking around the tangled undergrowth. For once, we traveled down rapidly curving and branching paths, heading for the unnerving sensation that sang to me from some indeterminate distance. We passed along the top of an abrupt 12-meter cliff, an old waterfall basin. Two little kids waved at us from below, while their parents snapped pictures of the surrounding beauty. Salut, Alina called, waving back. I waved as well, a little concerned. I didn't want to be uncovering horrible things with kids out. You made it to the end of the stories. That means it's the perfect time to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you haven't already, leave a like and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have a great time relaxing, and good night.